Chapter 2286. The martial sage realm black armored guards were invincible against the soldiers and experts of Red Rock City. However, facing Ji Tianqing and Yunyao, they were like clay chickens and pottery dogs, unable to withstand a single blow. The three black armored guards besieged the two of them and they fought fiercely in the night sky. However, after exchanging a few blows, the three black armored guards were thrown out. One of them had his hooves chopped off while the other had his arm chopped off. Another black armored guard had a hideous wound on his chest and his stomach had almost been cut open. After being severely injured, the three black armored guards were horrified and fear grew in their hearts. They knew that they were no match for the two of them and they wanted to retreat. One of them waved his hand and made a hand seal, forming a mysterious dark red seal. Suddenly, the experts of the demon clan in the night sky charged toward Ji Tianqing and Yunyao under the lead of a demon general. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao were besieged and they had no choice but to use their sword skills to kill dozens of demon clan experts. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the three heavily injured black armored guards silently flew across the night sky and fled towards the north. They only cared about escaping and did not care about the lives of the demon clan troops. Anyway, Anu had instructed them to prioritize their own lives if they were to encounter a strong enemy. The demon clan troops were cannon fodder and they were meant to be sacrificed. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. Bam bam bam. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao waved their swords and sword radiance filled the sky. It was as though the stars were shining and the moon was shining in the sky. After a short while, more than 40 demon clan experts were killed by the sword radiance and they were all dead. The two of them then turned their heads to look at the night sky in the north. Those three non-humankind beings actually abandoned tens of thousands of devils and fled for their lives alone. One of the black armored guards used a secret skill just now and the demon clan experts rushed over to cover their escape. If I am not wrong, they must have used a secret skill to control the demon clan experts. The two of them communicated through voice transmission as they chased after the black armored guards. Not long after, the two of them flew 3,000 miles and caught up with the three black armored guards. Piercing sword. Ji Tianqing fiercely stabbed with the sword of burial of heaven, and a cold light flashed in the night sky. In the next moment, the cold light pierced through the back of a guard and destroyed the dark red scale armor on his chest. Boom! Amidst the deafening noise, cold light blossomed like a mushroom cloud, illuminating the night sky for hundreds of miles. The corpse of the black armored guard was also blown to pieces, turning into a rain of blood that sprinkled down. Astral wind, heavenly fire. Yunyao also shouted and waved her silver moon dual swords, sending out two dazzling sword lights. One was a blazing white astral wind sword, while the other was a dark red heavenly flame sword. Both were more than 10,000 feet long. Clearly, she had mastered these two powers after refining the windfire deity bead. Bang bang. With a muffled sound, the two giant swords struck the two black armored guards. The two of them suffered heavy injuries once again. One of them was almost cut in half at the waist, while the other had half of his body severed. The violent impact sent the two of them flying. Swoosh! Ji Tianqing teleported and chased after them. He waved his sword and shattered the scale armor on the chest of one of the guards. Yunyao followed closely behind. She held her two swords and pierced the chest of the other guard. At this point, the two black armored guards died on the spot and fell into the mountains below. Yunyao wanted to use her astral wind and heavenly fire to destroy the corpses of the two guards. Ji Tianqing waved his hand to stop her. He landed in the mountains and personally checked the corpses of the two guards. After a while, he took their interspatial rings. Then, he waved his hand and sent out a flame to burn the corpses to ashes. Yunyao saw him holding the two black rings and looking at them carefully. She asked, Tianqing, are you trying to find clues from their belongings? But we don't know anything about their language and writing. Ji Tianqing put away the two rings and said with a smile, it's okay. Just because we don't know anything now doesn't mean we won't know anything in the future. It's always good to be more careful. I'll look into it when I have time. After saying that, he turned around and flew back with Yunyao. After a while, the two of them returned to the sky above Red Rock City. At this point, the war was coming to an end. 80% of the demon army outside the north and south city gates had been killed by the glass fire dragon. There were only a few thousand soldiers left, and they were utterly defeated. They fled north in a panic. The glass fire dragon chased after them mercilessly. The thousands of soldiers of Red Rock City followed closely behind. Within Red Rock City, the citizens who had survived the calamity cheered and cheered. In the night sky, a white-haired elder in golden armor and a purple cape was commanding the city guards to clean up the mess and save the injured. This person's face was covered in blood and his body was covered in wounds. His aura was also very weak. However, he gritted his teeth and endured his injuries. He refused to heal himself and had to take charge of the situation. This was because he was the current city lord of Red Rock City, the Sand Martial Lord. Although the war was won and Red Rock City was saved, hundreds of thousands of people died. However, hundreds of thousands of civilians died tragically in the war, and tens of thousands of houses and buildings were destroyed. Even the number of survivors numbered in the tens of thousands. All of these needed to be dealt with. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao stood side by side in the night sky and looked down at the situation of the entire city. Seeing that the remaining demons in the city had been cleared and that the rescue and cleanup work had begun, the two of them were completely relieved. At this time, the Sand Leaf Martial Lord brought more than 30 human experts with wounds all over their bodies and arrived in front of the two of them. Everyone looked at Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao with burning eyes and bowed gratefully. "Thank you, benefactors, for saving our lives," everyone said in unison. Their tone was sincere and emotional. Then, the Sand Martial Lord took 2 steps forward and bowed deeply to Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. "I am Sandyi, the City Lord of Red Rock City. Here, on behalf of the 2 million people, I would like to thank the 2 benefactors for saving our lives. If not for the 2 benefactors bringing the divine dragon to save us, Red Rock City would have been occupied by the demons long ago. This old man and hundreds of thousands of people would have died in the flames of war. This old man will never forget such great kindness. Red Rock City will never dare to forget it." Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao nodded slightly and raised their hands to signal for the Sand Martial Lord to stand up. However, the Sand Martial Lord maintained his bowed posture and asked respectfully, "This old man is muddle-headed. I have yet to ask for the names of the 2 benefactors so that the people can remember them in their hearts." The more than 30 experts also nodded and echoed, their expressions filled with anticipation. Ji Tianqing looked at the Sand Martial Lord and said calmly, "I am Ji Tianqing, I believe you should have heard of me. This person beside me is my wife, Yun Yao, the goddess of Luoshui Divine Kingdom." Suddenly hearing his 2 sentences, the Sand Leaf Martial Lord, as well as many nobles and experts, all widened their eyes, revealing deep shock. Everyone was stunned for a moment before coming back to their senses. Immediately, they began to discuss excitedly and exclaim, "Oh my God! It's actually the famous young Master Tianqing. The #1 genius of the continent, the leader of Pillar of Heaven's Mountain." Chapter 2287. The Sand Leaf Martial Lord and the nobles and experts of Red Rock City were all immersed in excitement. No one had expected that the one who saved them at the critical moment would be the famous Ji Tianqing. His name had already spread throughout the Shenwu continent and could be said to be a household name. Especially when countless people found out that he might be the reincarnation of Kenshin, their admiration and reverence for him reached the peak. After a long time, everyone's emotions calmed down. The Sand Leaf Martial Lord bowed respectfully and said, "Young Master Ji, Madam Ji, this old one humbly asks the 2 of you to stay in Red Rock City for a few days. Since the 2 of you have saved Red Rock City, this old one and all the citizens of the city would like to act as hosts and entertain the two of you well to express our gratitude." After he finished speaking, more than 30 experts also bowed in unison and earnestly asked Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao to stay. Ji Tianqing naturally understood their intentions. They were so cordial not only to express their gratitude but also to rope in their backers. After all, if he and Yun Yao stayed in Red Rock City, the city would be safe and the demonic army would not dare to invade again. However, Ji Tianqing refused without hesitation and said with a calm expression, "We appreciate everyone's good intentions, but saving Red Rock City is just a small matter and is not worth mentioning. Now that the demonic army is wreaking havoc, the other cities are in danger and millions of citizens are homeless. We still have to go and save the other cities, so how can we delay in Red Rock City?" Since he had made it clear, the Sand Leaf Martial Lord and the other experts could only give up on the idea. Young Master Ji is right. This old one was muddle-headed and did not think of this. The Sand Leaf Martial Lord laughed self-deprecatingly and said with a face full of admiration, "Young Master Ji is so benevolent and willing to save millions of citizens. It is really the blessing of the 72 cities and the people of the world." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and did not say anything else. He and Yun Yao crossed the night sky and flew onto the back of the glazed fire dragon. They were about to turn and leave. The Sand Leaf Martial Lord and the other experts hurriedly bowed and said in unison, "We respectfully send off young Master Ji and Madam Ji." Everyone maintained a respectful posture and watched the glazed fire dragon disappear into the horizon before they stood up one after another. Sigh. It's such a pity that I couldn't make young Master Ji stay, even if it was just for a banquet. Actually, we should have thought of this long ago. Young Master Ji is a godlike figure, why would he stay in the small Red Rock City? Young Master Ji is benevolent and virtuous. Obviously, he is here to resolve the crisis of the 72 cities and resist the army of the Devil Clan. For a godly person like young Master Ji, it is already a great fortune for us to be able to witness his true appearance. How can we ask for more? Everyone discussed regretfully for a while before dispersing. The glazed fire dragon carried Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao towards the northwest. Ji Tianqing clearly remembered that there was a city 40,000 li to the northwest of Red Rock City. It was an ancient city with more than 2,000 years of history. Its scale, population, and power were slightly stronger than Red Rock City. That city was called Tong An City. Ji Tianqing guessed that since Red Rock City was attacked by the Devil Clan, Tong An City would not be spared either. 2 hours later, the glazed fire dragon arrived at Tong An City. The facts proved that Ji Tianqing's guess was right. The originally peaceful Tong An City had just experienced a war. When the glazed fire dragon arrived, the war seemed to have just ended. The ancient city with a radius of 200 miles was a scene of devastation and disorder. The ground outside the city was cracked and filled with holes. There were also many corpses and armor fragments scattered around. The east and west city gates were breached and the city walls collapsed, turning into a pile of rocks. The ancient city was originally filled with buildings, streets, and courtyards. It was a peaceful and elegant scene. However, the city was now in ruins. The streets were twisted and broken, and the houses collapsed. There were flames and thick smoke everywhere. Countless corpses of humans were strewn on the ground or lying in pools of blood. Dark red blood dyed the ground and ruins red. It even formed small streams that spread silently on the ground. Groups of sturdy, ferocious-looking demon warriors had been flying around the city in a hurry, with sabers, spears, swords, and halberds in their hands. Large groups of human beings were huddled together helplessly, with ragged clothes and bodies dyed in blood. They were all helplessly and pitifully squeezed together, being guarded by demon warriors. The people did not dare to cry loudly. They could only sob softly. Everyone suppressed the fear and despair in their hearts, shivering in the darkness and coldness. There were still small-scale battles happening in various parts of the city. The Devil Clan warriors who were unwilling to submit or wanted to escape fought the Devil Clan with all their might. However, they were only mercilessly suppressed and died on the spot. The city lord's mansion at the center of the city had already been taken by the Devil Clan experts. The city lord's mansion was also in ruins. It had clearly been through a great battle. Corpses and blood could still be seen on the ground. The mansion was brightly lit and screams and wails could be heard. Obviously, the Devil Clan was killing the Devil Clan warriors and guards who were stubbornly resisting. All in all, Tong and City had been taken over by the Devil Clan army. Chapter 2288. The city lord's residence was heavily guarded. At least 1,000 demon race warriors wielding sabers, spears, swords, and halberds guarded the various passageways and gates. Thousands of human martial practitioners squatted on the empty ground in the front yard and plaza. These people were the guards and servants of the city lord's residence. They were all covered in wounds and stained with blood. They looked miserable and wretched. Originally, there were more than 3,000 people in the city lord's residence. More than 2,000 of them had been killed in the previous battle. These people were both survivors and captives. They had been chased to the front yard and plaza by the demon race warriors and squeezed together. More than 200 murderous demons stood around them, closely watching over these captives. The fate of these captives would depend on the outcome of the negotiations in the city lord's residence. The discussion hall of the residence was covered in corpses and blood. The air was filled with the thick stench of blood. 5 non-humankind guards, who were wearing black armors and had 4 hooves, stood in the front with their heads held high, looking down at those human warriors in the hall. There were more than 20 human martial practitioners, all of them experts above the primordial soul realm. Among them was the purple-robed, dignified Tong and city lord. There were also armored generals guarding the city, as well as many nobles dressed in luxurious clothing. Of course, their disheveled hair and bodies covered in blood made them look miserable and pitiful. Many of them were heavily injured, with broken limbs. They constantly groaned in pain. The leader of the foreign race guards was followed by a demon general. Under the orders of the foreign race guards, the demon general approached the Tong and city lord and shouted in the demon language. You only have 2 choices now. Either you surrender and submit to us, or we massacre the city and kill everyone in it. Our lords have limited patience. You only have 10 breaths to consider. Tong and City was not far from North Underworld Mountain and had more than 2,000 years of history. Therefore, the Tong and city lord and the nobles all knew the demon language and writing. When the crowd heard the angry shout of the demon general, they trembled in anger, their hearts filled with humiliation and anger. The white-haired Tong and city lord held his severed left arm with his right hand. His blood-stained face constantly changed. He was weighing the pros and cons as he struggled fiercely. He was unwilling to submit to the demons, but he also did not want the 700,000 people in the city to be slaughtered. Caught between a rock and a hard place, there was no choice. Soon, 10 breaths had passed. The demon general approached again and looked down at him from above. He asked in a deep voice, "Time's up. Since you can't make a choice, then let the entire city be buried with you." As he spoke, the demon general pulled out his saber and slashed at the head of Tong and city lord. The 2 of them were too close to each other, and Tong and city lord was severely injured, so there was no way for him to dodge. It looked like he would die under the saber of the demon general, dying on the spot. Just at this critical moment, a dazzling silver light suddenly flew in from outside the door. Swish! In the blink of an eye, the silver light was like an arrow, crossing several dozen feet and piercing through the demon general's forehead. Boom! With a muffled explosion, a bloody hole appeared on the demon general's forehead, from which purple blood spurted out. His burly body, which was more than 10 feet tall, was also sent flying backwards by the powerful impact. He flew backward for a full 10 feet before crashing into the wall with a muffled dong sound. When he landed, he was already a corpse, rolling to the feet of a foreign race guard. This sudden turn of events caused everyone to be stunned for a moment. The 5 foreign race guards frowned and looked outside the door with sharp eyes. The city lord of Tong and City and the 20 or so nobles and masters were also looking at the door with suspicion and anticipation. In the next moment, a young man and woman in white robes stepped into the hall with swords in hand. Everyone's eyes lit up, and they could not help but praise in their hearts, "What a pair of peerless beauties." The white-robed man was handsome and heroic, and his eyes were as deep as the starry sky. He exuded a mysterious and powerful aura that made people look up to him. The white-robed woman was beautiful and otherworldly. She was as pure and elegant as a goddess from the 9 heavens, and her every move was natural. The two of them stepped into the hall with their swords pointed to the ground. On the ground behind them, purple blood dripped from the tips of their swords, forming a line on the ground. Everyone instinctively looked outside the door and saw countless demon corpses lying on the steps and in the front yard. It was clear that all the demons outside the door had been killed. The city lord of Tong and City and the human race experts were pleasantly surprised by this scene. The faces of the 5 foreign race guards darkened. They all gripped their swords and halberds tightly as they stared sharply at the newcomers. Suddenly, the leading foreign race guard thought of something, and his expression changed drastically. His eyes widened in shock. He instinctively pointed at Ji Tianqing and shouted in the language of the Heaven Punishers, "It's him. He's Ji Tianqing." The other 4 foreign race guards did not recognize Ji Tianqing. After their companion's reminder, the 4 of them realized who Ji Tianqing was. Their expressions changed drastically, and they became very wary. "It's Ji Tianqing. The guy who gave the captain such a headache. Damn it. Wasn't he at the Pillar of Heaven's mountains? Why would he be here? Everyone, don't panic. Although he's very powerful, the 5 of us can definitely defeat him if we work together." The few foreign race guards communicated telepathically. It was obvious that they were not confident. Soon, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao walked to the center of the hall and stood still. The two of them stared coldly at the 5 foreign race guards. They slowly raised the swords in their hands, and a murderous aura surged from their bodies. At the same time, Ji Tianqing said without even turning his head, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and leave this place." Of course, this sentence was directed at Tong and City Lord and the others. Everyone regained their senses and hurriedly got up from the ground. They supported each other as they ran toward the door. Seeing that the demons outside the door were all dead, everyone became excited and sped up to escape the city lord's residence. At this moment, the 5 foreign race guards roared angrily. They waved their swords and charged toward Ji Tianqing and Yunyao. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Their swords, spears, swords, and halberds created a sky full of red light. It was like thousands of sharp blades and sword shadows, filling the entire hall. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao were surrounded by the dark red light blades. They were surrounded, but they were not afraid. Swoosh! 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 The two of them waved their swords at the same time. Hundreds of starry sword rays formed a sword formation and attacked in all directions. Bam! 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 The sword rays collided with the sky full of red light blades. There was a series of deafening explosions. The destructive shockwave exploded on the spot and destroyed half of the city lord's residence. The meeting hall and dozens of houses and palaces around it were all blown to pieces and scattered in the night sky. The earth shook violently, and numerous cracks appeared on the ground. Chapter 2289. The two sides only exchanged one blow, and the entire city lord's mansion was destroyed. Even half of Tong and City started to shake as if there was an earthquake. The citizens who were already in despair became even more panicked and they saw another battle in the city. The demon race warriors who were patrolling and suppressing the citizens were also filled with doubts and worries. They hurried to the city lord's mansion to check on the situation. However, when thousands of demon race warriors approached the city lord's mansion, they were sent flying by the violent shockwaves before they could see the situation clearly. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao joined forces to fight against the 5 alien race guards. They fought fiercely in the sky above the ruins. The two sides fought fiercely, using all kinds of secret techniques. The dazzling sword light and the radiance of spells were like stars in the bright moon, illuminating the night sky for hundreds of miles. It was so dazzling that people could not open their eyes. The destructive shockwaves spread out like waves, engulfing half of Tong and city. Those who were closer to the city lord's mansion, no matter if they were demon race warriors or human citizens, were killed by the shockwaves. There was nothing they could do about it. After all, the shockwaves from the battle of martial sages were too powerful, and they attacked indiscriminately. In just 10 breaths, the 5 alien race guards were sent flying. All of them were injured to different degrees. They were covered in blood, and those who were seriously injured had their arms or legs chopped off. With their strength, they could not fight against Ji Tianqing and Yunyao head-on. However, they were still unwilling to give up. Ignoring their injuries, they roared and charged again. After a few moves, they were sent flying again by the sword light. They drew arcs in the night sky and fell outside the city while screaming. 2 of them were more unlucky. While they were still flying in the sky, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao caught up with them and pierced through the scales on their chests. After fighting so many times, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao had already figured out each other's weaknesses. That was why they could kill them so quickly. The 2 unlucky alien race guards exploded on the spot. They fell to the ground and turned into a pile of debris. They died just like that. The other 3 had witnessed the tragic death of their companions. They were filled with grief and indignation, but they were also filled with fear. They realized how terrifying Ji Tianqing was, and their fighting spirit disappeared. They didn't dare to stay any longer. Swish! Swish! The 3 of them turned around and flew away without hesitation. They turned into dark red lights and pierced through the night sky, heading straight for the north. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao would not show any mercy. Naturally, they would hunt him down with all their might. 100 breaths later, the 2 parties had chased each other for 1,000 miles before flying into a mountain range. Yunyao executed her ultimate sword technique and killed an alien guard on the spot. Ji Tianqing unleashed 2 of his ultimate skills and killed 2 non-humankind guards one after another. At this point, the 5 foreign race guards who had invaded Tong'an City were all killed. It was a bit of a pity that the 2 foreign guards had managed to send out 2 transmission jade slips before their deaths. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao put away their swords and flew towards Tong'an City. While they were on their way, the 2 of them communicated with their divine consciousness. We don't have to guess. They sent out the transmission jade slips with all their might. They must be reporting to Anu. It doesn't matter. We can't hide the news anyway. And you will know about it sooner or later. If Anu knows that we are involved in this matter, he will not be able to eat or sleep in peace. He will try to get rid of us first. Ha! I would like to see if the 2 of us can kill him if we work together. Soon, the 2 of them flew back to Tong'an City. While they were still far away, the 2 of them saw the glazed fire dragon wreaking havoc in the city. It was chasing after the defeated demon warriors. It twisted its mountain-like dragon body and killed a bunch of demons with a wave of its dragon claws. With a sweep of its dragon tail, it turned hundreds of demons into dust. In front of it, those soul refinement realm and primordial soul realm demons were as weak as ants. If more than 30,000 demons gathered together, it could kill them all in 15 minutes. However, those demons were divided into dozens of teams and scattered around the city. No matter how strong it would take a long time to kill them all. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao also joined the battle. They split up and killed the remaining demons. The city lord of Tong and City and more than 20 experts regained their confidence and hope. They led a large group of human warriors to surround the escaping demons. The battle lasted for an hour before it ended. More than 90% of the 30,000 demons that invaded Tong and City were killed. Only a little more than 1,000 managed to escape. Tong and City finally calmed down. The hundreds of thousands of humans who were lucky enough to survive all cheered excitedly. The city lord of Tong and City quickly ordered the city guards and human experts to help the injured and clean up the ruins. While dealing with the aftermath, he forced himself to endure his heavy injuries and personally expressed his gratitude to Ji Tianqing. With his experience in Red Rock City, Ji Tianqing did not want to waste time and did not reveal his name. He casually said a few words and was about to send the city lord of Tong and City away. However, one of the nobles beside the city lord of Tong and City stared at Ji Tianqing for a long time. When Ji Tianqing was about to turn and leave, he mustered his courage and shouted, "Young Master Ji, please wait." Ji Tianqing subconsciously turned to look at him and asked with a frown, "Is there anything else?" The nobleman was overjoyed. He cheered excitedly, "Ha ha ha. You are Ji Tianqing, Prince Ji Tianqing. I'm not seeing things. This is too unbelievable, young Master Ji actually came to Tong and City and personally saved us." The city lord of Tong and City was also stunned. After a long while, he regained his senses and muttered, "Young Master Ji. Ji Tianqing. The leader of the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains, the #1 genius of our race. The reincarnated young Master Ji of Kenshin. Oh my God! Is this real? We are so honored." The city lord of Tong and City was also so excited that his blood was boiling and his face was flushed red. He and the noble were about to kneel down and bow to Ji Tianqing to express their gratitude. However, when they turned around, they realized that there was no one in front of them. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao had already left. Even the golden-red glazed fire dragon had disappeared. The huge surprise and excitement was immediately replaced by a deep sense of regret and disappointment. The two of them stood there in a daze and looked at the night sky in the north for a long time before leaving. Dawn was approaching. The glazed fire dragon carried Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao across the sky and rushed to the next city. Yun Yao looked at Ji Tianqing beside her and joked with a smile, "I didn't expect your reputation on the continent to reach such a level. Even if you hide your name, there are still people who can recognize you and worship you so fervently." Ji Tianqing shook his head and chuckled, "The 72 cities are close to the Pillar of Heaven's Mountains. It's not surprising that they know of my name and deeds. Most importantly, they had just been invaded by the demon race's army, and their families had almost been destroyed." Chapter 2290. 4 hours later. The sun rose from the east and shone down warm sunlight. The glass fire dragon carried Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao and was about to reach Bay City. This city was closer to the north than Red Rock City and Tong and City. It was also closer to North Underworld Mountain. Therefore, Ji Tianqing had reason to believe that this city had been attacked as well. Or perhaps, Bay City had already been occupied by the foreign race guards and the devil race. Soon, the glass fire dragon crossed a mountain range that was 10,000 feet tall and arrived above Bay City. It was as Ji Tianqing had expected. Bay City had just experienced a huge battle last night. The pitch-black stone city walls were in shambles and had more than 10 holes in them. The city was in a mess. There were broken walls, collapsed houses, and ruins everywhere. The ground was filled with cracks and holes. Corpses were piled up everywhere. Even the soil was dyed dark red. There were thousands of devil race warriors guarding the stone city walls. Above the city, there were hundreds of devil race experts patrolling and monitoring the surroundings. There were also large groups of devil race warriors shuttling back and forth in the city. They looked like they were in a hurry. But this was not the main point. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao's gazes landed on the sky above Anbei City. There was a huge black battleship floating in the sky. Ji Tianqing had seen that sharp, cold, and mysterious battleship many times. He could recognize at a glance that it was a Yu's battleship. Immediately, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao frowned. Ji Tianqing's lips curled into a playful sneer. Previously, we were still saying that Yu would definitely think of ways to get rid of us. I didn't expect that we would be so lucky to meet him in the blink of an eye. Yun Yao nodded and said calmly, "It's just that his battleship is here. It doesn't mean that he's here too. If he's really here, then let's have a battle with him and see how capable he is." Okay. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly, and said in a resentful tone, "Last time at North Underworld Mountain, the ancestral demon god took action, and we did not have the chance to fight with Yu alone. Now that our strength has increased by several times, and Yu is alone here without the help of the ancestral devil god, this is the best chance to get rid of him." As they spoke, the two of them rode on the glazed flame dragon and sped up towards Anbei City. As soon as the glazed fiery dragon arrived above the city gate, the hundreds of dark demons who were hovering above the city rushed over with murderous intent. Those demon clansmen looked ferocious as they roared and cursed. They crazily swung their weapons and besieged Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. Thousands of saber lights and sword shadows, as well as purple or blood-red spell shadows, poured down like a torrential flood. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were not afraid at all. They did not even have the slightest intention of retreating. Ji Tianqing took out the sword of burial of heaven and swung it expressionlessly in the face of the demonic light that blotted out the sky. Swoosh! A starry sword light that was more than 10,000 feet long, like a crescent moon, with the power to destroy everything, struck the sky full of light. Kaboom! In that instant, an earth-shattering explosion rang out, spreading across a radius of several hundred kilometers. The sword shadows and demonic light that filled the sky instantly collapsed, turning into fragments of light that filled the sky. The extremely violent impact wrapped around the billions of fragments of light, forming a half-purple, half-red shockwave that swept through the hundreds of dark demons. Bam! 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 A series of muffled booms erupted, reverberating in the sky endlessly. All the dark demon warriors that were hit by the shockwave spewed blood from their orifices. Their bodies shattered as they screamed and flew back. The stronger ones and the luckier ones managed to keep their lives, while the heavily injured ones fell into the city. Most of the dark demons were smashed to pieces, dying on the spot. Ji Tianqing only used one move to clear the sky, instantly killing hundreds of dark demon warriors. Such a shocking scene caused the tens of thousands of dark demons in the city to reveal inexplicable expressions of shock. The human civilians who were holed up in the ruins or under the watch of the dark demons also witnessed this scene with their own eyes. Everyone was wild with joy, letting out excited cheers. "Everyone, look! There's a divine dragon in the sky. A divine dragon has appeared. Finally, an otherworldly expert has come to save us. Oh my God, am I dreaming? Could it be that the heavens have sensed our prayers and sent a god to save us? Did you see that? There's a man and woman in white on the back of the divine dragon. They're the ones who killed those dark demons. What a perfect pair. They actually came riding a divine dragon. They must be gods, right?" The human civilians who were in desperate straits saw the glazed fire dragon and Ji Tianqing and his wife, and their hope was immediately rekindled. As a result, the people were so excited that they all regarded Ji Tianqing and his wife as gods, saviors of the world. After all, there were only a handful of experts who could ride a divine dragon in the sky. The civilians had never seen it before and had only heard of similar myths and legends. Moreover, Ji Tianqing's sword had broken through all techniques and killed hundreds of dark demons in an instant. This was even more heaven-defying. At the same time, thousands of dark demons flew out of Anbei City and charged towards the glazed fire dragon from all directions, wanting to intercept Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. These dark demons seemed to have gone crazy. With the mentality of facing death unflinchingly, they used their most powerful trump cards with all their might. Even if they died on the spot, they had to stop the glazed fire dragon. Swoosh! 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 Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao made their moves at the same time. They used their incomparably marvelous sword techniques and powerful ultimate techniques to resist the siege of the numerous devils. Bang! 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 A series of explosions sounded in the sky. The area within 50 kilometers was filled with chaos. It was filled with demonic light and all kinds of shadows. No one could see Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao's figures. They could only hear the continuous loud explosions mixed with the high-pitched dragon roars. Many human civilians looked up at the sky. Their hearts were in their throats, and they were extremely worried. Finally, 10 breaths passed. The Dharma spells and shadows that filled the sky dissipated. Only then did the glazed fire dragon's figure appear. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were still standing on the dragon's back. They looked unscathed. On the other hand, the thousands of dark demon warriors had long been slaughtered. Almost all of them were dead or injured. Seeing this, the human commoners felt as if a heavy stone had been lifted from their hearts, and they cheered excitedly once more. But at this moment, the black battleship floating in the sky suddenly opened its door. A tall and mighty figure appeared. This was a man with 4 hooves. He wore silver armor and a fiery red cloak. There was a treasured sword hanging from his waist. 2 black armored guards followed him to the deck and stood still. They looked down at the glazed fire dragon from above. The silver-armored man's scarlet eyes locked onto Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. After seeing the two of them clearly, he immediately revealed a cruel and sinister smile. He said in the dark demon language, Ji Tianqing. There's a path to heaven, but you don't take it. There's no door to hell, but you barge in. Chapter 2291. Without a doubt, the man in silver armor was An Yu. Last night, he had personally piloted the battleship and brought 8 black armored guards to attack Anbei City. From the start of the battle until now, he had stayed in the battleship and had not shown his face. After all, there was no need for him to deal with a weak force like Anbei City. He just needed to send a few black armored guards and 40,000 demon soldiers to easily take over the entire city. An Yu lived like a prince in the battleship. As he closed his eyes to rest, he planned his next move. Because of Anbei City's geographical advantage, he decided to use this city as his main camp and continue to expand towards the south. At the same time, he learned that Ji Tianqing had come to the 72 cities and was trying to stop his advance. He had to consider how to find Ji Tianqing and kill him as soon as possible. However, just as An Yu was planning his next move, a glazed fire dragon barged into Anbei City. 2 uninvited guests had slaughtered more than 1,000 demon warriors. An Yu was alarmed and walked out of the battleship to check on the situation. Seeing that it was Ji Tianqing, An Yu was pleasantly surprised. He did not expect that a cunning fellow like Ji Tianqing would walk right into his trap. Ji Tianqing looked up at An Yu and sneered. An Yu, you wanted to work with North Underworld Mountain, but now that the ancestor Fiend Celestial has come out of seclusion, North Underworld Mountain has kicked you aside. How do you feel now? Are you very angry and humiliated? He spoke in the demon language, so An Yu naturally understood. However, An Yu pretended not to understand and said with a gloomy expression, Ji Tianqing, you are just making wild guesses. What a joke. I traverse the universe and am invincible. Why do I need to work with others? Ji Tianqing laughed even more disdainfully and said in a mocking tone, ha ha ha. You don't have to pretend in front of me. If not for the failure of our cooperation and North Underworld Mountain no longer having a place for you, why would you be in a hurry to attack the 72 cities? Aren't you afraid of the ancestor Fian Celestial's revenge, so you seized the 72 cities in advance to find a place to stay? Anyu's thoughts were exposed, but he couldn't refute. He was instantly enraged. He glared fiercely at Ji Tianqing and cried out in a deep voice, "Ji Tianqing, I'm too lazy to waste my breath on you. Whatever you say, I'll treat it as your last words." With that, Anyu waved his hand and gave an order in the Heaven Punisher's language. Immediately, the two black-armored guards behind him turned into streaks of light and rushed toward Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. It wasn't just that, for black-armored guards flew out from the city governor's estate of Anbei City, and they brandished their weapons as they charged over. Swish! Swish! A total of 6 black-armored guards attacked from different directions, slashing out sharp blades that covered the sky and earth, releasing monstrous ferocious might. The 6 of them joined forces and attacked together. Unexpectedly, they secretly combined the profoundness of the battle formation and released a formless soul-suppressing power. It was as if a huge mountain of 100,000 miles came crashing down. The glazed fire dragon found it hard to support itself. Its body swayed and almost fell from the sky. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao's faces were also solemn. They hurriedly circulated their qi to resist the formless pressure. In the next moment, more than 100 crimson blades fell from the sky and were about to drown Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. At the critical moment, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao flew into the sky and swung their swords to fight against the 6 black-armored guards. 7-star sword. Sky-seizing claw. Ji Tianqing's left palm struck out with a golden dragon claw that was as big as a mountain. He waved his sword in his right hand and shot out 49 rays of cold light. Long river of stars and moon. Yun Yao shouted softly. She waved her silver moon dual swords and slashed out hundreds of rays of starry sword light. The rays of sword light that filled the sky gathered together and formed a huge river of stars. It carried a mighty divine power and blasted toward the 6 black-armored guards. Bam! 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 The starry sword light and dragon claw clashed with the crimson light in the sky. There was a deafening explosion that shook the sky. A violent shockwave spread out and swept across a few hundred miles. It swept across the sky above Anbei City. Suddenly, sand and stones flew around the city. Countless broken houses were turned into ruins on the spot. Even the surrounding stone walls were smashed into pieces by the shockwave and turned into debris. The two sides exchanged blows. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were unharmed. The 6 black-armored guards were thrown back more than 10 miles and they were panting heavily. The glazed fire dragon took the opportunity to fly away and leave the battlefield. It charged toward the demon tribe army near the city gate. It had not broken through to the martial sage realm and it was not suitable for it to interfere in the battle between the martial sages. Soon, the 6 black-armored guards came back and formed a hexagram formation to attack Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing sneered. He immediately sent a voice transmission to Yun Yao and said, "These foreign tribesmen do not cultivate dermic powers. Instead, they cultivate a kind of power that is similar to killing aura. They can release an invisible soul-suppressing power and increase their power through the formation. However, the hexagram formation is very common in the various worlds and is not difficult to break through. You and I only need to work together and change between Qian, Dui, Kuan, and Li. Then, we will have a chance to break through." As he spoke, Ji Tianqing used the mysterious Big Dipper steps. He waved the sword of burial of heaven with his right hand and stabbed out dozens of cold radiances. Yun Yao immediately understood what he meant. She also used the mysterious steps and changed her position. At the same time, she waved her 2 swords to attack. The 2 sides fought fiercely in the sky. The fight was very intense. Bang! 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 The sword radiance and the crimson light collided and shattered at the same time. In an instant, hundreds of millions of light fragments fell like a colorful rainstorm. In just 10 breaths, the two sides had exchanged more than 20 blows. As expected, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao broke through the other party's formation. The 4 black armored guards were severely injured and vomited blood. They were sent flying dozens of miles away. The 4 of them were in a miserable state. There were either ravines on their chests and backs, and they were almost cut in half. Some of them were missing limbs. The other 2 black armored guards were less injured, but they were also unable to form a formation. When Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao charged over, the 2 of them could only defend themselves tiredly and were forced to retreat. After 3 blows, the 2 of them were also sent flying. They vomited blood and let out shrill cries. At this point, the 6 black armored guards were severely injured. Even though the humans in Anbei City were fleeing in all directions, they did not forget to watch the battle. After seeing Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao display their prowess, everyone was overjoyed. Their hearts were filled with desire and anticipation. And Yu had been standing on the battleship and watching the battle from above. Originally, with his status, he thought that he did not need to do anything. The 6 guards would be able to deal with Ji Tianqing and his wife. However, the result was the complete opposite. He lost all his dignity and was extremely furious. Scarlet flames surged in his eyes, and his entire body was emitting a towering killing intent. When he saw Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao chasing after him relentlessly and wanting to take the opportunity to kill the 6 black armored guards, he could no longer sit still. Ji Tianqing, I'm here. Don't be arrogant. Chapter 2292. Swoosh! Swoosh! 2 blood-red sword beams that were thousands of feet long descended from the sky with a divine might that could destroy everything. At that moment, the space within a 150-mile radius seemed to freeze. An invisible soul-suppressing power enveloped the entire Anbei city. Before the sword beams arrived, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were already trembling from the suppressive force. Their eyes were solemn. At the critical moment, Ji Tianqing pulled Yun Yao without hesitation and fled out of the city. We can't fight within you in the city. Otherwise, the shock waves from the battle will destroy the entire city. Ji Tianqing was here to save Anbei City. He didn't want to destroy the city and let hundreds of thousands of citizens die with it. Therefore, he chose to avoid the battle temporarily and used his teleportation secret technique to escape from Anbei City with Yun Yao. Rather than saying that he was escaping, it was more appropriate to say that he was moving the battlefield. Swoosh! A white light flashed. In the next moment, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao teleported 150 miles and appeared in the mountain range south of the city. And used 2 giant swords made of blood light missed their target. However, he was powerful. He reacted quickly and retracted his power. Swoosh! The giant swords formed by the blood-red light immediately dissipated. In the city below, the thousands of demon race cultivators all had looks of joy on their faces, as if they had just survived a calamity. Fortunately, Yu had retracted his sword beams. Otherwise, they would have been killed. After all, Yu's goal was to occupy Anbei City, not destroy it. Swoosh! With a flash of blood-red light, Yu teleported 150 miles and appeared in the mountain range south of the city. At that moment, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao flew across the sky together and escaped south for another few dozen miles. Yu stared at Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao's backs and revealed a bloodthirsty grin. He shouted angrily, "Isn't it too late to run now?" As soon as he finished speaking, he waved his left hand and shot out 2 dark red balls of blood-red light. Swoosh! The 2 balls of blood-red light immediately transformed into 2 gigantic palms that blotted out the sky. They descended from the sky and slammed toward Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. Although they were 50 miles apart, the two gigantic palms appeared above Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao's heads. To a martial god powerhouse like Yu, he could easily control the world within a 500-mile radius. With a thought, he could cast a spell to kill a powerful enemy from a 500-mile distance. This was the ability of a martial god powerhouse. At this critical moment, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao could only use their swords to stab the gigantic palms in the sky. Fortunately, they were already outside Anbei City. Both of them didn't dare to unleash their full strength, had no worries of their own. Sword. Meteor assault. Ji Tianqing unleashed 100% of his power. He held the sword of burial of heaven with both hands and stabbed it toward the gigantic palms in the sky. Yun Yao held the silver moon dual swords tightly and combined them into one. She stabbed out a gigantic starry sword that went against the sky and stabbed toward the other gigantic palms. Kaboom! Two deafening sounds exploded almost at the same time and resounded through the world. A mushroom-like starlight exploded from the gigantic palms on the left and blasted the gigantic palms into pieces. The gigantic starry sword blasted a huge hole in the gigantic palms on the right. Both palms exploded at the same time. The starlight and blood-red light shards that blotted out the sky rained down like torrential rain, enveloping a 200-mile radius. The shockwave spread out and raised the surrounding mountains to the ground, stirring up clouds of dust. Seizing the opportunity, Yu rushed to Ji Tianqing's side in a flash and slashed with his sword. Swoosh! 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 36 blood-red sword rays pierced toward Ji Tianqing's vital points at lightning speed. They were aimed at his glabella, chest, dantian, and other parts of his body. At such a close distance, Ji Tianqing couldn't dodge them. He could only block them with his sword. Swoosh! 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 In that instant, he swung his sword 42 times to block the blood-red sword rays. Clang! 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 The two swords clashed fiercely. Ji Tianqing was sent flying by the violent impact. The sword of burial of heaven in his hand buzzed non-stop. After he retreated for 30 miles, he finally neutralized the impact. Burial of heaven's voice rang in his head. Damn it! That guy's sword is a divine weapon. We can't fight him head-on. Otherwise, I might shatter. The sword of burial of heaven's tone was angry and unwilling. It was once a famous king-grade divine sword. Now, it had fallen to such a state where it could not even block a void god-grade divine sword. This was a disgrace and a tragedy. Understood. Ji Tianqing didn't say much. He responded with 3 words and used his ultimate move without hesitation. Celestial Dragon Body. He shouted. His body lit up with a golden light that shot up into the sky. His body suddenly expanded. After the golden light faded, he turned into a 100 feet tall golden armored god of war. His combat strength had increased by more than 6 times. His combat strength was close to that of a divine weapon. So what if you've grown bigger? You'll only die faster. Ha ha ha. And Yu laughed arrogantly and swung his sword at Qin Xiaobei again. The Heaven Punishers were the best at close combat. Their combat strength was no weaker than that of the dragon tribe. Ji Tianqing knew that Yu was powerful. He didn't want to fight him head-on. He swung his sword and used his ultimate move. God-slaying sword. He held the Heaven Burier sword with both hands and slashed out a giant golden sword with all his might. It slashed toward Yu with boundless divine might. Yu didn't care about him at all. He swung his sword and swung it at Qin Xiaobei. Bam! 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 Yu immediately let out a muffled groan and flew back with a pale face. His eyes widened in astonishment, revealing a look of disbelief. He couldn't believe that Ji Tianqing, who was so weak 2 months ago, had become so powerful today. He was close to the martial god realm and could break through his defense. At that moment, Yunyao appeared out of nowhere. She swung her swords at a new meteor destruction. Following her angry roar, two meteor-like light blades cut across the sky and slashed at Anu. Bam! Anu's body shook. Two bloody grooves appeared on his back and blood spurted out. The incomparably powerful impact caused him to fly out at an even faster speed. Damn you, B*TCH. How could you hurt me? Anu was shocked and enraged. The fire in his eyes burned brighter. Ji Tianqing's strength had increased by more than 10 times. Even Yunyao's strength had increased by more than 10 times in 2 months. It was a miracle. Anu could not believe what he had seen. While he was in a daze, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao attacked him again. The husband and wife were in sync. They swung their swords from both sides and attacked Anu from both sides. The sword radiance shrouded Anu's body. With the help of the battle formation, their strength was increased by 3 times. Anu snapped out of his daze, and shouted with both shame and anger, "You pair of reptiles, I was just careless, that's why I was hurt by you. Do you think you have the right to fight me? Dream on." Chapter 2293. Kacha. Following a crisp cracking sound, 2 huge cracks appeared in the sky, forming the shape of a cross. From the pitch-black spatial cracks, a terrifying spatial storm surged towards Ji Tianqing and Yunyao. The huge blood-red cross-shaped slash locked onto their divine souls and exploded with a destructive power. At the critical moment, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao joined forces to counterattack. Sky-splitting sword. Galaxy ribbon. Both of them exerted all of their power and sent out a sword beam and a river of stars towards the sky. Kaboom! Amidst the deafening noise, the 1,000-foot giant sword and galaxy ribbon collided with the blood-red cross-shaped slash. Both of them collapsed at the same time, splashing out brilliance that blotted out the sky. There was a bright golden light, a dazzling silver light, and a dark red blood-red light. The destructive shockwave spread out in all directions along with 3 different colored fragments of light. Instantly, the sky and earth within a 300-mile radius were filled with colorful lights. However, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao were also sent flying by the powerful shockwave. Both of them were sent flying for 20 miles before the shockwave dissipated. They stopped steadily in the sky and panted with pale faces. Although both of them were not injured, their dermic powers were a little chaotic and sluggish. Their divine souls were also suppressed by an invisible force and their consciousness was a little blurry. Right at this moment, Anu rushed over again. He swung his sword and slashed out a few sword lights towards Ji Tianqing and Yunyao. Both of them were suddenly awakened and quickly used their swords to block the attack. Bam! Bam! Another series of muffled sounds exploded and both of them were sent flying again. They crashed into the ruins not far away and kicked up a cloud of dust. This time, both of them were slightly injured and there was blood at the corner of their mouths. Anu's target was clear. He ignored Yunyao and charged towards Ji Tianqing with his sword again. Swoosh! For dark red sword lights, carrying the power to cut through everything, fell from the sky and slashed towards Ji Tianqing. At the critical moment, Ji Tianqing hurriedly used the armillary sphere secret technique and disappeared. He merged with heaven and earth and easily dodged the sword light. Bang 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 bang. The blood-red sword light slashed down on the ground, creating a few deep ravines in the ground. Dust and smoke rose into the air. The ground within 100 miles began to tremble, and many cracks appeared. Where did he hide? When Anu saw Ji Tianqing disappear, he immediately frowned and released his divine sense to explore the surroundings. He could clearly sense Ji Tianqing's aura, but he just couldn't find where Ji Tianqing was. After 2 short breaths, he understood the situation and sneered. Heh heh heh. This brat actually grasped such an exquisite secret technique that allowed him to become one with the heaven and earth within 800 miles. Don't tell me that you think I can't do anything to you just because of this. And Yu's eyes flashed with contempt, and he turned to attack Yunyao. Sky Sea Sword. He shouted in a low voice, and with a wave of his sword, a dark red sword light that was hundreds of feet long slashed towards Yunyao. Yunyao hurriedly retreated to dodge, but the sword light was too fast, and she couldn't dodge it at all. She had no choice but to wave her silver moon dual swords, and slashed out 6 starry sword lights to block Yu's attack. Another series of muffled bangs sounded, and Yunyao was pushed back another 15 miles. Yu chased after her relentlessly, and he swung his sword again, creating a sky full of blood light. He swore to kill Yunyao on the spot. At the critical moment, Ji Tianxing could only show himself and join forces with Yunyao to block Yu. The two of them worked together and fought fiercely with Yu, and their figures kept flickering in the sky. Both of them kept changing their positions, and the battlefield was also moving quickly, getting further and further away from Anbei City. Everywhere they passed, the sky was filled with sword lights, and the mountains and rivers were razed to the ground, and the ground was slashed into ruins. The ground within 1,000 miles was filled with ravines and deep pits, and it was a messy scene. The sky was also filled with dust that didn't disperse for a long time. Rumble. Loud sounds reverberated in the sky, as if muffled thunders were rumbling. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. Both of them had exchanged tens of thousands of blows, and they had moved 6,000 miles, and were fighting in a mountain range. At this moment, Yu was already covered in wounds. More than 20 sword wounds were clearly visible, and blood kept flowing out of them. He looked a little wretched, but he was still full of divine power, and it wouldn't be a problem for him to fight for a few more hours. On the other hand, Ji Tianxing and Yunyao were not only covered in wounds and blood, but they had also used up more than half of their dermic powers, and their strength was weakening. Fortunately, although the two of them were heavily injured, they weren't fatal, and they didn't lose any limbs. However, Yu had the upper hand, and the two of them gradually switched from attacking to defending. In the end, they could only defend themselves with exhaustion. The situation was getting worse, and Ji Tianxing's expression became more and more serious. He secretly sent a voice transmission to Yunyao, "It's a pity that we can't kill him even if we work together. After all, he is a martial god, and his divine power is endless. We can't outlast him at all." Yunyao was also aware of it, and she replied, "Although we can't kill him, we are not defeated. It's enough that we can fight against him for so long. When we increase our cultivation by 2 or 3 levels, we are confident that we can defeat him. The only thing we can do now is to retreat from this place, and then we can come up with a countermeasure." Okay. Ji Tianxing agreed to her suggestion, and he retreated while blocking Yu's attacks. The two of them retreated as they fought, and they accelerated towards the south. Yu wanted to kill them, so how could he let Ji Tianxing go? He had been chasing them for 2 hours, and he had traveled more than 30,000 miles, but he still couldn't kill Ji Tianxing and Yunyao. Ji Tianxing and Yunyao's situation was getting more and more dangerous, and their powers were getting weaker. At this critical moment, Ji Tianxing could only use his secret skill, and he waved his palm to create a raging golden flame. God-slaying spear. The raging golden flame formed a 200-foot-long golden divine spear, and it pierced toward Yu with a destructive force. Yu could feel the terrifying power of the golden divine spear, and it was enough to pierce through his defense. He was instantly on guard, and he quickly cast a spell to defend himself. Swoosh! Swoosh! Not only did he release a red light shield to protect himself, but he also slashed out dozens of sword radiances with his sword. Bam! 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 In the deafening noise, the god-slaying spear shattered the sword radiances in the sky, and it pierced through his protective light shield. Crack! The dark red light shield shattered into billions of pieces. The powerful impact also sent Yu flying dozens of miles away. The god-slaying spear brushed past his left shoulder, leaving behind a wound so deep that his bones could be seen. Blood splattered everywhere, and an excruciating pain assaulted him. Yu's expression changed, and he couldn't help but let out a muffled groan. After a while, he finally got rid of the impact, and he stopped in the sky. Only then did he realize that there was no one in front of him. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao had already teleported away. Even when he released his divine sense to cover an area of 1,000 miles, he couldn't find Ji Tianqing and Yunyao. Damn it! Chapter 2294. The night was dark, and the cold wind howled. In an ordinary mountain peak in a mountain range thousands of miles away from Tongpan City, Ji Tianqing dug a temporary cave and set up a defensive formation. This cave became their temporary shelter. After escaping Yu's pursuit, the two of them came here and hid in the cave to recuperate. Although the two of them were covered in wounds and blood and looked rather miserable, their injuries were not serious. But in reality, his injuries weren't too serious. He would recover after some treatment. However, the two of them had used up too much of their dermic powers and were physically and mentally exhausted. They needed to cultivate for 2 days to recover. The cave was as dark as ink and silent. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao sat opposite each other. Their hands formed a seal and placed on their knees. They were circulating their dermic powers with their eyes closed. Their bodies were glowing with a faint silver light, and there was a majestic dermic power fluctuation. Unknowingly, 2 days had passed. The two of them had consumed pills to heal their injuries and recover their dermic powers. After 2 days and 2 nights of cultivation, they finally recovered to their peak state. The wounds on their bodies had also healed. After cleaning the blood stains and tidying up their hair and clothes, they were no different from before. Only then did the two of them calm down to discuss countermeasures. Yunyao said with a solemn expression, "We can't defeat Yu, so we can't save Anbei City. We can't fight him head-on either. We can only think of other ways." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "We just don't have to fight him head-on. He can't do anything to us. Anyway, he has conquered so many cities. He has to leave a few foreign race guards in each city. We'll go rescue them one by one and kill those foreign race guards and the devil race army. Then, we can cut off his wings. In the end, all the foreign race guards and the devil race army under him will be killed, and he will be alone. He won't be able to invade the 72 cities." Yunyao thought for a moment and continued, "I wonder if Yu is in Anbei City now. Will he use Anbei City as a place to stay?" Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a moment. He immediately had an idea. "Don't worry. Let's go to the nearby Tongpan City. We should be able to get some information. Also, I plan to find the city lord of Tongpan City and ask him to help us." Yunyao looked puzzled and asked, "How can Governor Tongpan help us?" Ji Tianqing explained, "Next, we need to save the cities and assassinate those non-humankind guards. We also need to avoid meeting Yu. If that was the case, he would need to know the movements of the demon army and Yu. But we don't have the time to ask around. This kind of thing can only be left to the city lords of the various cities." Yunyao came to a sudden realization and quickly nodded in agreement. "Yes, that's true." Every city lord had many scouts and heralds under their command, so they could quickly gather information. "You saved Red Rock City and Tongpan City, as long as you ask for their help, they will definitely agree." Ji Tianqing smiled and said, "Then let's not waste any more time. Let's set off as soon as possible." Then, the two of them left the cave and flew toward Tongpan City. An hour later, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao arrived at Tongpan City. The two of them waited for a while in the city lord's residence before meeting the city lord. Previously, Ji Tianqing saved Tongpan City but left without leaving his name. The city lord of Tongpan City and many nobles felt that it was a pity. In the past 2 days, the city lord had been busy dealing with the aftermath, treating the injured and rebuilding his home. When he heard that Ji Tianqing had arrived, he was overjoyed and came to greet him without hesitation. Ji Tianqing exchanged some pleasantries with him and told him the purpose of his visit. The city lord of Tong and city agreed on the spot without hesitation. He even promised that he would deliver the news accurately and on time. Other than that, the city lord also expressed his respect and gratitude for Ji Tianqing's actions in saving the various cities. Ji Tianqing asked the city lord about the situation in Anbei city. The city lord's expression turned solemn as he shook his head and sighed. He told Ji Tianqing that Anbei city had been completely occupied by the demon race's army and that there was a black flying ship in the sky above the city. In addition, in the past 2 days, another 3 cities had been attacked, and all of them had already fallen. Ji Tianqing understood the moment he heard that. And you had indeed treated Anbei city as his base and was even expanding outwards. The two of them talked about the situation in the 72 cities and mentioned Red Rock City. Ji Tianqing took the opportunity to ask the city lord of Tong and city to send a message to the city lord of Red Rock City to ask for help. The city lord of Tong and city did as he was told and immediately sent a message to the city lord of Red Rock City. Not long after, the city lord of Red Rock City replied and agreed without hesitation. With that, the scouts from the 2 cities would help Ji Tianqing to gather information for him. Only then was he relieved. After bidding farewell to the city lord of Tong and city, he left with Yun Yao. The two of them rode the glass fire dragon and flew towards the northeast. About 2 hours later, the glazed fire dragon arrived near a city. This city was close to Tong and city and Anbei city. The 3 cities were in a tripartite state and their strengths were similar. However, this ancient city had already been occupied by the demon race army. Ji Tianqing checked outside the city for a while and found out that there were 30,000 demon race soldiers in the city. They were scattered all over the city and were guarding the city gates and the important roads. Furthermore, there were 4 martial sage realm foreign race guards in the city lord's mansion. Hence, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao sneaked into the city and secretly headed to the city lord's mansion to assassinate the few foreign race guards. The glass fire dragon searched for traces of the demon race in the city and quickly killed the demon race army. Soon, a huge battle broke out. The glass fire dragon soared in the night sky and its body was surrounded by flames, lighting up half of the city. It sprinkled flames all over the sky and released a destructive attack that quickly killed the demon race army. The earth-shattering battle immediately alerted many of the demon race and the human race martial artists who were trapped in the city. Along with the loud rumbling sounds, there were shouts and cries for help from the people in the city. After a while, a huge battle broke out in the city lord's mansion. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao launched a surprise attack and severely injured 2 of the foreign race guards. The other 2 foreign race guards rushed over to save them and immediately joined the battle to besiege Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. The battle between the martial sages caused a huge commotion. It could be said to be earth-shattering and the sound shook the clouds. The aftermath of the violent and devastating battle shattered the already dilapidated city lord's mansion on the spot. Not only did the house collapse into ruins, but the ground also collapsed into a deep pit and dust flew up into the air. Luckily, the battle only lasted for 100 breaths of time before it ended. The 4 foreign race guards were no match for Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. Both sides only exchanged more than 10 blows and the 4 foreign race guards were killed on the spot. They died without a complete corpse. After the couple dealt with the foreign race guards, they searched for the demon race army in the city and started a massacre. Chapter 2295. In the blink of an eye, an hour passed. More than half of the 30,000 demons stationed in the city were slaughtered by Ji Tianqing, Yun Yao, and the glazed fiery dragon. Dazzling magic spells lit up continuously. Monstrous flames rolled down and illuminated the entire city. Deafening loud noises reverberated in the night sky, shaking the entire city. Even though this battle had destroyed many houses and streets, causing the already dilapidated city to become even more devastated, the city was still in shambles. However, the people in the city all cheered excitedly. Many warriors even began to resist and besieged the demons with no regard for their own safety. After a full 2 hours, the battle finally ended. The city finally calmed down. More than 80% of the 30,000 demons were killed. Only about 4,000 of them fled in different directions. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were not in a hurry to leave. They landed on the ruins of the city lord's mansion under everyone's gazes. Soon, more than 20 wounded human experts arrived above the ruins and bowed to Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao to express their gratitude. Ji Tianqing found out that this group of people were the nobles and generals in the city. The city lord had died in battle long ago. Now, their leader was a deputy city lord whose arm was cut off. Ji Tianqing instructed the deputy city lord to take charge of the aftermath, treat the wounded, and repair the destroyed houses. At the same time, he also asked the deputy city lord to send out scouts to gather information. As long as there was news about the demon army and anew, they would report to him immediately. When the deputy city lord and the nobles learned of his identity and purpose, they were all wild with joy and moved to tears of gratitude. Facing his request, of course, everyone agreed without hesitation. Ji Tianqing did not waste any more time. He bid farewell to everyone and left with Yun Yao. The deputy city lord and the nobles stood above the ruins and watched the two of them leave. They discussed excitedly for a long time. 6 hours later. It was before dawn, the darkest time of the day. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao quietly arrived near a city and hid in the night sky to observe the situation in the city. On the wasteland ahead, there was a city with a radius of 50 kilometers, called Taiyi City. Under the night sky, the city was very quiet. Only a few places were lit. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao very quickly discovered that Taiyi City had long been occupied by the Devil Race Army, and peace had already been restored at present. The north and south gates had been repaired and were guarded by many demon warriors. Squads of demon warriors were patrolling the city walls and the streets of the city. Even outside the city lord's mansion, there were over 1,000 demons standing guard. In addition, there were dozens of devil race troops moving through the city. They kept breaking into houses and pavilions one after another, plundering large amounts of cultivation resources and materials and hurriedly transporting them to the city lord's mansion. The human clan warriors and commoners who had been robbed could only hole up in their homes and watch all this happen. Anyone who dared to resist would be besieged by the devil race warriors and chopped into minced meat on the spot. Their ending was extremely tragic. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao exchanged glances, both revealing indignant expressions. This group of damned beasts, not only did they invade the city and slaughter the commoners, they also want to plunder the resources and wealth in the city. That's right, and Yu was an invader and plunderer to begin with. His nature is hard to change. He invaded 72 cities, but he won't manage this area well. He only knows how to plunder resources recklessly. As they spoke, the two quietly sneaked into the city and began to take action. The operation plan was as usual. The glazed fire dragon went to deal with the devil race army. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao rushed to the city lord's mansion and killed the foreign race guards who stayed behind. The battle began very quickly. The glazed fire dragon no longer concealed itself and released the glazed heavenly fire, pouring it towards the gathering place of the devil race. The flames lit up the night sky, waking up the devil race and warriors in the city. The dragon breath and light balls released by the glazed fire dragon also exploded in the city, causing Taiyi City to shake non-stop. At the same time, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao also rushed to the city lord's mansion. The two of them quietly snuck into the city lord's mansion, found 4 foreign race guards, and began to fight. The two sides fought fiercely in the night sky, sparks flying everywhere, loud noises shaking the sky, and violent and terrifying aftershocks erupting. However, after the two sides exchanged 10 moves, the 4 foreign race guards were severely injured and vomited blood, smashing into the ruins. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao chased after them and were about to kill them all. At this moment, a middle-aged man in a purple robe rushed over with a few experts in armor roaring and attacking Ji Tianqing and Yunyao without caring about their own safety. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao were stunned. The two of them did not fight back, only blocking. That was because these experts were all humans. Yunyao frowned angrily and shouted in a deep voice, "What are you doing? We are here to save you. How can you not know what is good for you and attack your own people?" However, the man in the purple robe and the experts turned a deaf ear to her and continued to attack without fear of death. Ji Tianqing frowned and observed for a moment, and he immediately saw the clues. "Yao Yao, don't hurt them. I think there is something wrong with their minds. Their divine souls should be controlled." Yunyao finally understood. She ignored the man in the purple robe and the others, holding her sword and attacking the 2 foreign race guards. Ji Tianqing also teleported to the side of a black armored guard and stabbed with his sword as fast as lightning, piercing the scales on the black armored guard's chest. In just 10 breaths, the two of them killed 3 foreign race guards. The last outsider guard was also severely injured. He turned around and fled in a panic. Ji Tianqing chased after him and killed him with 2 slashes. At this point, the 4 foreign race guards were all killed. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao returned to the sky above the ruins to save the man in the purple robe and the few human experts. Heaven capturing palm. Ji Tianqing shouted in a low voice and struck out 2 dazzling golden palms, capturing everyone in his palms and holding them tightly. No matter how they struggled, they could not escape from his palms, let alone attack. Then, Ji Tianqing used his divine sense to envelop the man in the purple robe and carefully examined him. After carefully observing several times, Ji Tianqing nodded with a serious expression and said, "This guy is a tribulation-passing martial monarch. He is very likely the city lord of Tai City." The situation was as I expected. Someone used some kind of secret technique to control his soul and make him listen to everything they say, just like a puppet. Yunyao nodded slightly and asked, "What kind of secret technique is it? Haven't you seen it before? Are you confident that you can break it?" Ji Tianqing pondered for a moment and gently shook his head. "I haven't seen this kind of secret technique before, but it is very similar to a soul control technique. Moreover, the aura of this power is the same as the foreign race guards. It must be their doing. I have to study it carefully before I can break it." "Okay, then you take your time to study it. I will go and help Liuli first." Yunyao reminded him and flew away with her 2 swords. Chapter 2296. Time passed quickly. Unknowingly, 2 hours had passed. Yunyao and the glazed fiery dragon joined hands and slaughtered more than 20,000 demon warriors in the city. The devil army was utterly defeated. Only about 5,000 of them were left, and they fled in all directions. Yunyao didn't chase after them. She brought the glazed fiery dragon back to Ji Tianqing's side. At this time, Ji Tianqing grabbed the purple-robed man with his left hand. His right hand was casting a spell, shooting out beams of sacred white light. Swish! 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 Each beam of white light was only 1 foot long. They were like silver needles, piercing into the purple-robed man's glabella, forehead, and neck. In the end, more than 60 beams of white light gathered in his mind. They arranged themselves in a special order and moved around slowly. The purple-robed man's body twitched. His face was contorted in pain. Foul blood kept spurting out from his nose and mouth as if he was about to die. Yunyao frowned. She was a little worried, but she didn't say anything. She didn't want to disturb Ji Tianqing's spell casting. 100 breaths of time passed. The purple-robed man's twitching became more and more severe. His head was crooked, his eyes were slanted, and his face was twitching. More foul blood flowed out from his mouth. Suddenly, Ji Tianqing waved his right hand and shot out a spell seal as fast as lightning. Swish! The 60 beams of sacred white light condensed into an egg-sized light ball and flew out from the purple-robed man's head. A mass of dark red mist was wrapped in the dense white light ball. It was still twisting and struggling fiercely. At the same time, the purple-robed man opened his mouth and spat out a jet of black blood. He closed his eyes and fainted. Yunyao asked with concern, "Tianqing, how's the situation? This man. Is he saved?" "Yes," Ji Tianqing nodded. He took the white light ball and presented it to Yunyao. "I tried many methods, but I couldn't get rid of the strange race's soul-controlling technique. So, I tried to use the power of the heaven-mending pearl. Sure enough, it could get rid of this evil power. It's just that the method was a bit harsh. It stimulated this man's soul too much. That's why he fainted. But he should be fine. He will wake up in a while." After listening to Ji Tianqing's explanation, Yunyao finally understood the whole story and was completely relieved. Then, Ji Tianqing repeated the same trick and removed the power of the soul-controlling technique for the other human experts. Those human experts in armor were all generals and dignitaries of Tai City. By controlling the city owner and those nobles, the non-humankind guards would be able to control the entire Tai City. Unknowingly, an hour had passed. Ji Tianqing removed the mysterious energy from the bodies of the generals and nobles. At this time, City Lord Taiyi coughed twice and gradually woke up. Blood was dripping from the corner of his mouth. He looked around blankly and finally, his gaze fell on Ji Tianqing and Yunyao. He got up in a daze, rubbed his aching forehead, and couldn't help but mutter, "Where is this place? What about the demon army? Have you beaten them back? Quickly help me up. I can't rest. I must fight to the end." As he spoke, City Lord Taiyi stood up shakily and reached out to feel for the sword at his waist. Ji Tianqing said in a dignified tone, "City Lord Taiyi, the demon army has been beaten back. Tai City has also been saved. You don't have to worry." City Lord Taiyi immediately sobered up. His spirit was lifted and he asked in disbelief, "Is what you said true? The demon army has really been beaten back? Are the people of Tai City safe?" Ji Tianqing nodded and patiently explained to him, "The demon army that invaded Tai City was ordered by the experts of the non-humankind. Those non-humankind experts were all martial saint experts. You and these generals were all affected by the soul-controlling technique of the non-humankind, and their souls were controlled by them." After City Lord Taiyi heard this, he suddenly realized. He was pleasantly surprised and scared. He bowed excitedly and expressed his gratitude to Ji Tianqing. "On behalf of all the people of Tai City, I thank Benefactor for your help. If not for Benefactor's help, Tai City would have been destroyed long ago. I haven't asked for Benefactor's name, so that I can remember it in my heart." Ji Tianqing didn't hide it and said honestly, "My surname is Tianqing, and this is my wife, Yunyao." City Lord Taiyi, we learned that the demon army had invaded the 72 cities and specially came from the Pillar of Heaven's mountains to rescue them. However, we still need your cooperation and assistance to help us find out more information. City Lord Taiyi immediately opened his eyes wide and stared at Ji Tianqing in disbelief. He was so excited that his whole body trembled. After a long time, he came back to his senses and nodded without hesitation. "I didn't expect that young Master Ji would come to Tai City. I apologize for my rudeness. Young Master Ji cares about the people. With a benevolent heart and extraordinary martial skills, you saved the people of each city. It is really a great fortune for the 72 cities. We will never forget such kindness. As long as you have any orders, I will go through water and tread on fire without hesitation." Ji Tianqing didn't waste any more time. After exhorting a few words of advice to City Lord Taiyi, he left with Yunyao. City Lord Taiyi stood on the ruins and bowed respectfully. He watched as Ji Tianqing and Yunyao disappeared into the horizon. After a long time, he suppressed his excitement and woke up the other generals and nobles to deal with the aftermath. Of course, he remembered Ji Tianqing's instructions. He organized the scout camp immediately and let the scouts go around to find out more information. In the next few days, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao had been running around. The two of them sneaked into one city after another and killed the foreign race guards and demon army who stayed in the city. In just 4 days, the two of them had rescued 8 cities and killed over 30 non-humankind guards, as well as over 200,000 demon race soldiers. They were really invincible. No one could stop them. The leaders and commanders of quite a few cities were planted with soul-controlling magic by the non-humankind, and became the non-humankind's puppets. After Ji Tianqing killed the foreign race guards and eliminated the demon army, he still had to cast the technique to save the city lords and generals. After the city lords woke up, he told them his identity and purpose and asked them to help him find out more information. The city lords and leaders of the cities were grateful to him. How could they refuse his request? This way, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao could always get the latest news and know the movements of the surrounding 20 cities. The two of them were very convenient. They could always attack accurately and quickly. Even when Enyu was furious when he heard the news and came to take revenge on them with his battleship, the two of them cleverly avoided him. They didn't meet Enyu face to face, but they kept cutting off his wings and weakening his forces. Enyu was very angry and troubled, but he couldn't do anything. A few days later, the news of Ji Tianqing and his wife killing the demon army and rescuing the major cities spread in the 72 cities. The cities that weren't invaded by the demon army also knew about this. Thus, Ji Tianqing and Yunyao's fame spread in the major cities. Chapter 2297. The night was dark. Anbei City was deathly silent. Occasionally, the roars of night owls and wild beasts could be heard from outside the city. The city was pitch black. Only the area where the Devil Clan was stationed could be lit. In the slightly dilapidated city lord's mansion, the meeting hall was brightly lit. Enyu, dressed in silver armor and a scarlet cloak, was leaning on the large throne at the head of the table. 8 guards dressed in black armor stood in 2 groups in the hall. The atmosphere was heavy and oppressive. Everyone's mood was heavy and their expressions were ugly. After all, what had happened in the past few days had dealt a heavy blow to them. After a long silence, Enyu finally opened his mouth to speak. He looked coldly at the entrance of the hall and stared into the dark night. He asked in a low voice, "What's the current situation? How many people do we have left? How many cities do we have?" The guard captain, who was missing 2 legs, respectfully lowered his head and answered in a hoarse voice, "My lord, in this half a month, we have taken down a total of 18 cities. When we attacked these cities, we sacrificed over 60,000 demon warriors. But now, 12 cities have been rescued, and 42 of our people have died. Out of the 500,000 demon warriors, only 130,000 remain. Many of them are crippled and have suffered heavy injuries." Enyu's expression became even darker. His hands crushed the armrest of the throne. In other words, we only have 10 guards and 130,000 demon trash left to guard the remaining 6 cities. The 8 guards in the hall felt his monstrous anger and immediately lowered their heads even more. The guard captain said in a trembling voice, "That's right. However, we have successfully plundered a large amount of resources, worth at least 800 million spirit stones. What's the use of that?" Enyu was extremely angry. He slapped the table in front of him. Suddenly, the jade table broke into pieces, turning into a pair of pieces that splattered everywhere. Some of the pieces were too strong. When they hit the guards, they did not dare to move. And you stood up and roared angrily, "The resources and wealth that the humans have accumulated can only be used by them. There is very little that can be used by our race. So what if we have taken down so many cities and plundered so many useless resources? Our brothers are dead. 42 of them were killed. When I came to this world, I only brought 80 people with me. During this period of time, more than a dozen of them had died. With the addition of these 42, I only have about 20 guards left. Not to mention invading the 72 cities, it's hard to say if we can even defend the North Underworld mountain." The thunderous roar reverberated throughout the hall, causing everyone's eardrums to hurt. The 8 guards lowered their heads like ostriches, not even daring to breathe. After a while, when Enyu's anger had subsided a little, the leader of the guards mustered up his courage and said, "Sir, it's all that bastard Ji Tianqing's fault. Our brothers were killed by him. Unfortunately, he's in the dark while we're in the light. We can't do anything to him. Other than you, none of the brothers can stop him. In this subordinate's opinion, why don't we temporarily abandon these 6 cities and return to the North Underworld mountain?" Of course, Enyu was incomparably embarrassed. He was so angry that he almost vomited blood. "Ji Tianqing. You goddamn bastard. One day, I'll skin you alive and chop you into pieces." Enyu's eyes were burning with anger as he cursed hysterically. When his anger had subsided a little, he ordered with a dark face, "We can't continue like this. If we spread our forces to the 6 cities, Ji Tianqing will take us down one by one. Immediately return to each city and search for resources and treasures as fast as you can, regardless of the cost. Tomorrow morning, we'll retreat from the 72 cities and return to the North Underworld mountain." The 8 guards bowed at the same time and said, "Yes, sir." Then, everyone quickly left the hall and disappeared into the night. Enyu stood alone in the hall, looking at the night sky with a ferocious expression as he pondered silently. "Ji Tianqing, that bastard, ruined my series of plans. Now, I only have about 20 guards left. I can barely defend the 5 regions of the North Underworld mountain. I can't expand and invade anymore. I only hope that the ancestor devil god will come out of seclusion later. Give me another 10 months, and I can hold on until the general arrives with the fleet. When that time comes, I'll destroy the North Underworld mountain and the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and kill everyone. Only in this way can I dispel the hatred in my heart." Enyu murmured to himself. The scarlet flames in his eyes flickered fiercely, and his body emitted a strong killing intent. Before dawn, it was the darkest time of the day. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao quietly flew across the night sky and arrived at the sky above a city. This city was located on the grassland. The terrain was vast, and it was prosperous. It had a history of 3,000 years. Moreover, this was the 13th city that the 2 of them had rescued. A few days ago, Ji Tianqing had received news that this city had been invaded. He calculated that this ancient city must be guarded by the devil race's army, and there must be a few guards from the other races. The city lord, nobles, and generals must have been planted with the soul-controlling technique. He was already prepared for a massacre before dawn. Swoosh! He and Yunyao hid in a cluster of dark clouds above the city, observing the situation in the city from above. In the dilapidated city, broken walls and ruins could be seen everywhere. Most of the areas in the city were dark. Only a few areas were lit. However, what puzzled the 2 of them was that the number of Devil Race's warriors guarding the city gate and the city wall was very small. There were at least 1,000 of them. There were no Devil Race warriors patrolling the city. The outside of the city lord's mansion was also empty. Many warriors of the human clan gathered their courage and walked onto the streets, searching for traces of the demon clan. The terrified and despairing commoners also gathered in groups of 3 to 5 as they discussed in whispers. Ji Tianqing released his soul consciousness to check the situation in the city lord's mansion. The result was even stranger. There was no aura of the Devil Race's guards in the mansion. There were only a few dozen Devil Race warriors guarding the main doors. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned, murmuring in confusion, "Strange. The Devil Race's guards and the Devil Race's army are all gone. Did they get the news and run away in advance?" Yun Yao frowned and thought for a while. She nodded and said, "It's possible. These days, we've attacked many cities and killed more than 30 Devil Race's guards and more than 200,000 Devil Race's guards. And you can't hold on any longer. He doesn't want to be defeated one by one, so he can only take his people and retreat." Ji Tianqing showed a playful, cold smile, nodding and saying, "Our plan has succeeded. We've forced you and the Devil Race's army to retreat. If he continues to occupy those cities, those Devil Race's guards will be killed by us sooner or later." Chapter 2298. Since the alien guards and the demon army had retreated, it proved that Ji Tianqing's plan had succeeded. The two of them sneaked into the city and landed directly in the city lord's mansion. The demon warriors guarding the gate and passage immediately rushed over with a murderous aura. Ji Tianqing waved his hand and shot out a dazzling golden light, instantly killing a large number of demon warriors. The two of them swaggered through the gate and walked toward the meeting hall. During this time, two more groups of demon warriors rushed over to intercept them, but they were also casually killed by Ji Tianqing. When he and Yun Yao walked to the entrance of the hall, there were only a dozen or so demons left in the city lord's mansion. They all fled in fear. Ji Tianqing couldn't be bothered to chase after them. After all, the glass fire dragon was wreaking havoc in the city, hunting down those demons everywhere. At this moment, a white-haired old man rushed out of the meeting hall, leading a dozen or so experts in armor and brocade clothes. These were all human experts. The white-haired old man had reached the Tribulation Transcendence realm. Everyone's expressions were a little abnormal, and there was a dark red line between their eyebrows. Ji Tianqing knew at a glance that these people had been affected by the soul control technique, and their minds were controlled by the alien guards. Even though the alien guards and the demon army had retreated, Ji Tianqing could guess that the alien guards must have given these people some orders before they left. As expected, after the white-haired old man and the dozen or so human experts rushed out of the meeting hall, they roared and charged over, surrounding the two of them. Ji Tianqing frowned and couldn't help but mutter, "Although we know that these people have been affected by the soul control technique and their minds are controlled by the alien race, we are here to save them. We are here to save them, and they treat us as if we killed their father. No matter how I think about it, it's awkward." Yun Yao chuckled and comforted him, "You know that they have been affected by the soul control technique and can't do anything about it. This is not their intention. Why bother with them?" As the two of them spoke, they each used their capturing techniques and captured the dozen or so experts in the blink of an eye. What happened next was very simple. Ji Tianqing, starting with the white-haired old man, cast a spell on everyone one by one, dispelling the mysterious energy in their bodies. The whole process lasted for an hour. Over 10 human warriors showed all kinds of ugly behaviors, twisting and twitching in pain. Fortunately, after an hour, the white-haired old man woke up first. Ji Tianqing immediately knew that this person was the city lord. The dozen or so experts were the generals guarding the city, or the leaders of the aristocratic families and sects in the city. When they were fighting against the invasion of the Devil Army, they were knocked out by the non-humankind guards, and silently fell under the soul-controlling magic. They couldn't remember what happened after that. They were basically in a muddle-headed state. Now that they had woken up, they finally understood the evil deeds of the demon army and the other races. At the same time, he also understood how lucky he was to be saved by Ji Tianqing. Such a lucky thing was enough for them to brag and show off for the rest of their lives. Ji Tianqing didn't waste any more time. He explained the whole story, and then left with Yun Yao while the others respectfully sent him off. In this hour, the glass fiery dragon had killed more than 1,000 demon soldiers, cleaning up the remaining demon army in the city. The couple rode the glass fiery dragon, disappearing into the sky shortly. At the same time, the sky was getting brighter. A new day had arrived. The city lord and the high-ranking officials started to clean up the mess. Hundreds of thousands of people in the city who were lucky enough to survive also walked on the street happily. Within 2 days, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao rode the glass fiery dragon and explored 5 cities. The situation of each city was similar. The city walls and gates were broken, and the cities were full of ruins and ravines after the war. Hundreds of thousands of people were scared and desperate. They were hiding in their homes or underground, shivering and waiting for their fate to end. However, the devilish army and foreign race guards stationed in the city had already retreated. Before they left, they emptied the treasure vaults of the city, as well as all kinds of resources and valuables. Only a small number of demon soldiers were left. Seeing that the situation wasn't good, they all ran away quietly. After Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao arrived, they only needed to rescue the city lords and the high-ranking officials who were under the soul-controlling technique. Then, they had completed their mission. The damage they had caused couldn't be recovered. The two of them could only comfort the city lords and the high-ranking officials. They could start over and recuperate for many years. Then, they would be able to restore their vitality. The high-ranking officials and the people in the cities understood this, so they weren't too upset or desperate. It was lucky enough that they could keep their lives and didn't have to be slaves of the demon army. People were also grateful to Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. They admired them to the extreme. No matter which city they went to, once they revealed their identities, they would be warmly welcomed and courteously welcomed by the people. Moreover, many people knew about Ji Tianqing's deeds as they passed the news between the cities. Thus, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao became the great heroes and saviors of the 72 cities. Tens of millions of martial artists and people regarded the two of them as their second parents. They respected them to the extreme. On the morning of the 3rd day, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao entered the last city, Anbei City. Previously, Anu had occupied this place and used it as a temporary base. Therefore, the two of them used this place as their last stop. Reality proved that Anu didn't leave any backup plans or traps. Since he had already decided to retreat, he wouldn't cause any more trouble. In any case, he had fought with Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao before. In the end, he couldn't kill Ji Tianqing. In the dilapidated Anbei city, only a mess of ruins was left. The twisted and broken ground was left, and there were many broken walls. Hundreds of thousands of people had spontaneously organized themselves and were searching for the injured in the city, repairing the collapsed buildings, and rebuilding their homes. Only the city lord's mansion was quiet. No one came out to preside over the overall situation, nor did anyone plan to deal with the aftermath. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao entered the city lord's mansion and casually asked 2 guards to get the answer. It turned out that the city lord, a few nobles, and generals were all in a muddle-headed state. Not only did they not listen to their subordinates' suggestions, but they also ignored government affairs. They just meditated in their rooms every day and seemed to have nothing to do. Moreover, the guards privately spread rumors that the city lord and those nobles seemed to be a little mentally unstable. However, people only dared to discuss such things in private and didn't dare to spread it publicly. When Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao heard this, they understood what was going on. Therefore, Ji Tianqing directly stated his purpose for coming. He found the captain of the guards and led him to the city lord of Anbei City. When the captain of the guards found out about Ji Tianqing's identity, he was overjoyed. It was as if he had seen his savior and was extremely emotional. He agreed without hesitation and led Ji Tianqing to the city lord's residence. In the end, the moment the two of them stepped through the door, they were attacked by a white-haired old man. The black-robed old man with a head full of white hair was the city lord of Anbei City. After sending the captain of the guards flying with a palm strike, he charged at Ji Tianqing without caring about his own safety. Ji Tianqing frowned and casually threw out a giant golden palm to capture the city lord. Chapter 2299. An hour later, the Anbei city lord, the nobles, and the generals woke up one after another. Everyone asked the guards and understood what had happened. They immediately felt ashamed and regretful. After knowing Ji Tianqing's identity, everyone was pleasantly surprised and felt that it was unbelievable. The same situation happened again. The Anbei city lord and the nobles bowed respectfully to express their gratitude and admiration to Ji Tianqing. Everyone's mood was very excited, and their words were also very sincere as they urged Ji Tianqing to stay. For the past half a month, Ji Tianqing had to face the same scene almost every day and was already numb to it. He did not want to waste time, so he rejected the Anbei city lord and the nobles' invitation and urged everyone to deal with the aftermath as soon as possible. The Anbei city lord and the nobles felt that it was a pity, but they did not dare to force it. They could only send Ji Tianqing and Yunyao off respectfully. Riding on the glazed fire dragon, the couple turned into a streak of fire and disappeared into the horizon. Everyone stood there for a long time before reluctantly turning to leave. The glazed fire dragon flew across the sky and headed south. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao stood side by side on the dragon's back and looked at the sky in front of them. Yu and the demon army had been forced to retreat. The crisis of the 72 cities had been resolved, so the two of them felt much more relaxed. Although we were delayed for half a month and suffered heavy injuries, it's all worth it now. Yunyao revealed a gratified smile and said in a relaxed tone. Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "That's right. Our plan succeeded. All our previous efforts were worth it. Not only did we save the 72 cities, but we also protected the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and dealt a heavy blow to Yu. After this, Yu suffered heavy losses and his subordinates were greatly weakened. It will be difficult for him to cause any trouble in the future." Yunyao said with a playful smile, "Yu and the demons are very similar. They are both greedy and bloodthirsty plunderers. It's very difficult for the two to reach a true cooperation. Previously, Yu's strength was strong and had some value to the demons. Now, Yu did not have many guards left, and his strength was pitifully weak. I reckon that the devil race will no longer cooperate with him and will even attack him soon to recover the 5 southern regions as soon as possible." Ji Tianqing nodded to show his agreement. He sneered, "The demon race and the alien races are not kind people. If the conflict between them intensifies and both sides suffer, that would be great." As soon as his voice fell, a spiritual light flew over from the distant sky and landed in front of him. After the dense brilliance dissipated, a light green communication jade slip was revealed. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and said, "Yu and the demon army have already retreated, the crisis of the 72 cities has been resolved. Why is there still someone sending me a message?" Yunyao thought for a moment and persuaded, "Open it and take a look. Maybe there's something else." Ji Tianqing reached out and took the communication jade slip, releasing his divine sense to read its contents. After a while, he frowned, and his expression became somewhat strange. Yunyao revealed a puzzled expression and asked him, "What's wrong, Tianqing? What happened?" Ji Tianqing smiled faintly and said, "The Red Rock City Lord sent me a message, requesting for me to make a trip to Red Rock City. He did not say what exactly it is, but he said that more than 20 city lords have all rushed to Red Rock City and are waiting for me." Yunyao was stunned for a moment, then laughed lightly. "From what I see, you saved so many cities and citizens, and now your name has spread throughout the 72 cities. Most of those city lords are representing the citizens of the city to thank you in person." Ji Tianqing nodded and said, "That's very likely, but there's no need for that. Why do they have to mobilize so many people?" However, more than 20 city lords were waiting for him in Red Rock City, so he had to make a trip there no matter what. Under Ji Tianqing's command, the glass fire dragon changed its direction and flew towards Red Rock City. 8 hours later, the glass fire dragon flew to the sky above Red Rock City and stopped. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao stood on the glass fire dragon's back and looked down at the city below them. Red Rock City, which had a radius of 200 miles, was surrounded by mountains and was entirely built with reddish-brown rocks. When Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao first came to the 72 cities, they happened to see the demon army attacking Red Rock City. Thus, Red Rock City became the first city that they saved. The two of them had a deep impression of this prosperous ancient city that was filled with red maple trees. Even though Red Rock City had been ravaged by the flames of war and was filled with ruins and dilapidated walls, the streets and alleys were all in shambles. However, in this half a month, the Red Rock City Lord led the citizens to work together to rebuild their homes, buildings, and streets. Now that Ji Tianqing came to the city again, he realized that most of the ruins had been cleared. The houses and palaces that were destroyed by the flames of war were being rebuilt in full swing. Most of the twisted and broken streets and alleys were also repaired. Ji Tianqing estimated that Red Rock City would be restored to its original state in at most a month's time. However, the loss and death of nearly 1 million citizens could not be made up in a short period of time. At this moment, the citizens in the city saw the glass fire dragon in the sky and immediately cheered excitedly. The guards of the city lord's mansion also hurried into the mansion to report the news. After a while, more than 20 Tribulation Realm experts rushed out of the mansion's meeting hall. The leader was a white-haired old man in golden armor. He was the city lord of Red Rock City, Shayi Martial Lord. When he saw the glass fire dragon, he was instantly excited and led more than 20 experts into the sky. Swoosh! 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 In the blink of an eye, everyone arrived in front of the glass fire dragon. They stared at Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao with burning eyes and bowed in unison. "We welcome young Master Ji and Madam Ji." Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao looked over and saw that there were 26 experts on the stage. They were all city lords of various cities. Everyone was excited, full of surprise and anticipation. Ji Tianqing raised his hands and said with a gentle expression, "City lords, you are too polite. Please rise." Shayi Martial Lord cupped his hands again and said respectfully, "Young Master Ji, Madam Ji, please come to the city lord's mansion. Let's talk in the hall." Ji Tianqing naturally wouldn't refuse. He let Yun Yao put away the glass fire dragon and the two of them landed in the city lord's mansion together. Shayi Martial Lord and more than 20 city lords followed closely behind. They followed the two of them into the meeting hall and stood in 2 rows in the hall. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao sat at the head of the table while Shayi Martial Lord stood respectfully at the side. After everyone quieted down, Ji Tianqing asked, "Shayi Martial Lord, why are so many city lords gathered here and insist on meeting me face to face?" This. Shayi Martial Lord hesitated for a moment and swept his gaze across the more than 20 city lords. Seeing that everyone was full of anticipation, he said, "Young Master Ji, to be honest, before you came, we had already discussed it." Chapter 2300. Even though Ji Tianqing was already mentally prepared. But when he heard these words with his own ears, he was still stunned. Seeing that he frowned slightly but didn't interrupt, the Sand Leaf Martial Lord mustered up his courage and continued. "Young Master Ji, to be honest, the reason why the 72 cities were able to form their own faction and not fear the invasion of the northern underworld mountain was because everyone was united. Not only did we have 2 alliance leaders, but they were also martial saints, so all the city lords were convinced. However, in the past 200 to 300 years, the 2 old alliance leaders have passed away one after another, and the 72 cities have not been able to give birth to a new martial saint. The city lords fell into a situation where they were without a leader, and they gradually became estranged from each other, lacking help and care for each other. Because of this, when the foreign race led the demon army to invade, we couldn't even take care of ourselves, and one city after another was captured. When he said that, the Sand-Leaf martial lord sighed with a heart full of sorrow. The 20 or so city lords also lowered their heads, their expressions somewhat heavy. The Sand-Leaf martial lord continued, this time, the 72 cities were invaded by a strong enemy. If it weren't for young Master Ji's help, more than 20 cities in the north would have fallen long ago. Tens of millions of people would have been slaughtered by the demons or reduced to lowly slaves. It was you who saved all of us. We will always remember such a great kindness in our hearts. This time, the demon army was repelled, but it is hard to guarantee that there will be a next time. We, the city lords, are unable to protect the people under our rule, so we can only place our hopes on the pillar of heaven's mountain. This old man and the city lords earnestly ask young Master Ji to be merciful and take in the 26 cities in the north. After saying that, the Sand-Leaf martial lord knelt on one knee in front of Ji Tianqing and bowed deeply. The other 25 city lords also knelt down and bowed, shouting in unison, we earnestly ask young Master Ji to be merciful and take in the 26 cities in the north, protecting 50 million people. A deep and vigorous voice converged into a mighty sound wave, echoing in the great council hall. Everyone knelt on the ground. If Ji Tianqing didn't speak, they wouldn't get up. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing slowly stood up and said with a solemn expression, City lords, there is no need to be so courteous. Please rise. The Sand-Leaf martial monarch raised his head and looked at him. With a sincere tone, he said, Young Master Ji, this is our greatest wish. It is also the wish of the 50 million people. If you don't agree, we will kneel for a long time. Ji Tianqing immediately frowned and said with a solemn tone, Martial Monarch She, city lords, even if you keep kneeling here, it's useless. Give up on this idea. I helped the 72 cities to resolve the crisis and fight against the alien race and the demon race army. It was not only out of righteousness, but also to protect the pillar of heaven's mountains. A long time ago, many city lords came to the Huanglong Daoist and expressed their desire to submit to the pillar of heaven's mountains, but they were all rejected by me. Now that chaos is about to break out, I will also be caught in the eye of the storm and will be unable to fend for myself. They didn't even have enough spare energy to protect the pillar of heaven's mountains, so how could they have the energy to protect the 72 cities? So, everyone, please give up. After saying that, Ji Tianqing brought Yun Yao and walked towards the entrance, preparing to leave. More than 20 city lords were stunned on the spot. Their faces were filled with regret and disappointment, and the light of hope in their eyes was also extinguished. The Sand-Leaf martial monarch hurriedly followed Ji Tianqing and pleaded with a sincere tone, Young Master Ji, please wait. We know that this is too abrupt and that we have extravagant hopes in our hearts. But we have no choice. In order to protect the 50 million people under our rule, we have no choice but to do this. Young Master Ji, everyone knows that you are benevolent and virtuous, and you care about the people of the world. Could it be that you have the heart to watch the people of the various cities tremble under the iron hooves of the demon race and wait for the fate of death? Ji Tianqing had just walked to the entrance of the main hall when he heard the Sand-Leaf martial monarch's words. He stopped in his tracks. He didn't turn around and said solemnly, It's not that I don't want to save them, but I don't have the strength to do so. I don't dare to give the people hope and promise. If the demon race army comes south in the future and invades the 72 cities, disaster will befall again. If I have the spare strength, I will definitely come to save the people of the various cities. Other than that, everyone should think about how to strengthen themselves and strengthen their defenses. After saying that, he didn't stay any longer and left the city lord's mansion with Yun Yao. The Sand-Leaf martial monarch and more than 20 city lords all stood up and walked out of the main hall. Everyone stood in the spacious courtyard and looked up at Ji Tianqing and his wife flying away on the dragon. They were all filled with regret as they shook their heads and sighed and began to discuss. The glazed fire dragon flew across the sky at lightning speed and headed straight south. It was evening, and the dim yellow sunset shone on Ji Tianqing and Yunyao. Their figures were hazy, as gorgeous and glorious as gods. Yunyao turned her head to look at Ji Tianqing's side profile and asked calmly, "Why did you reject the requests of those city lords? As long as you agree, with your current reputation and status, the 72 cities will be under your command, and the power of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains will also be doubled." Ji Tianqing looked at the sky calmly and said with an indifferent expression, "Merging the 72 cities into the Pillar of Heaven's mountains may seem to expand the territory and power, but it's actually asking for trouble. The 72 cities have just experienced the flames of war, and those cities have been plundered clean. Nearly 10 million people are stranded outside, and it will take a lot of money and time to deal with the aftermath. Moreover, the 72 cities are close to the North Underworld Mountain, and they may be invaded many times in the future. If I accept the 72 cities, I have the responsibility and obligation to protect them. When the disaster really comes, I won't be able to split myself, so how can I protect them?" Yunyao nodded and said with a smile, "Seems like you have already thought it through. This is also good, we only need to protect the foundation of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains." Ji Tianqing turned his head to look at her and asked with a smile, "Yao Yao, seems like you plan to stay in the Pillar of Heaven's mountains and not return to the Luotian mountain." Yunyao nodded and said, "I won't return to the Luotian mountain for the time being. I have been cultivating in seclusion in the Luotian mountain for so long, and it wasn't easy for me to reach the martial sage realm. I can accompany you to travel the world, so how can I stay there? In the future, I will follow you, and no matter what hardships we face, we will fight side by side, and we will be inseparable." Ji Tianqing replied and nodded with a smile. He reached out and pulled her into his arms. The two of them snuggled intimately, standing on the back of the dragon and facing the setting sun, their shadows were elongated. On the morning of the third day, the glazed fire dragon carried Ji Tianqing and Yunyao back to the Pillar of Heaven's mountains. In the half a month that they were away, the Huanglong Daoist and a few elders were filled with worry. Fortunately, every 2 to 3 days, the scouts of the Pillar of Heaven's mountains would send back news. The Huanglong Daoist and the elders had already known about Ji Tianqing and Yunyao exterminating the demon clan and saving the 72 cities, and they were happy and proud of it. Chapter 2301. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao returned to their residence, freshened up, and changed their clothes. Not long after, the voice of a guard came from outside the door. "Young master, the great immortal wants to see you." Ji Tianqing had expected that Huanglong Daoist would ask to see him, so he said calmly, "Take him to the study and wait. I'll be there soon." The guard acknowledged and retreated. Ji Tianqing asked Yunyao to stay in the room to rest, and he went to the study alone. He passed through a corridor and just as he stepped into the study, Huanglong Daoist came up to him. "Disciple pays his respects to master." Huanglong Daoist saluted respectfully. Ji Tianqing nodded, sat down on the big jade chair, and asked, "What's the matter, Huanglong?" Huanglong Daoist stood in front of him and said unhurriedly, "Master, we already know what you and your wife have done in the 72 cities. Not only that, but the news that you killed many foreign race guards and annihilated 300,000 devil soldiers has also spread on the continent. Now, the martial arts world is talking about this matter and they respect you very much." Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said indifferently, "Hundreds of thousands of devil soldiers invaded the 72 cities. After all, it's a big deal on the continent. It's normal for the news to spread. Is there anything else?" Huanglong Daoist smiled and nodded, "There's another very important thing. No, it should be said that I have good news to report to master." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows, looked at him in confusion, and asked, "What good news?" Huanglong Daoist said excitedly, "Just yesterday, the scouts of our sect found out a piece of news. It is said that a team of explorers from the vast divine kingdom found a secret land by chance when they were adventuring in the ruins of God. The secret land had a powerful seal, and the design was very wonderful. It was far from ordinary ruins and secret lands. The strength of that group of explorers was not ordinary. There were originally 12 of them, but 9 of them died in the secret realm. The remaining 3 were also severely injured. Battered and exhausted, they fled back to the vast divine kingdom to seek help from stronger forces. That's how the news spread, and it's currently spreading across the continent. After Ji Tianqing heard this, he furrowed his brows and looked disinterested. It's just a secret realm in the ruins of God. How is that good news? The ruins of God is a battlefield left behind by ancient gods. Isn't it very common to see a mysterious and complicated place like this? Huanglong Daoist quickly shook his head and explained with a smile, "No, Master, the secret realm that was discovered this time is different. This secret realm was called the Illusory Void Secret Realm, and it had a history of 10,000 years. It is said that martial god Nangong used to cultivate and live in the cave when he was alive. It is still in good condition." Martial god Nangong. Ji Tianqing's interest was piqued. He frowned and pondered. He thought for a moment and immediately remembered the news about martial god Nangong. "Are you talking about martial god Nangong, one of the overlords from 8,000 years ago, the one who was most proficient in refining divine weapons?" Huanglong Daoist quickly nodded, "Yes, that's him." Ji Tianqing nodded and said thoughtfully, "More than 4,000 years ago, another overlord reached his limit of 10,000 years. He died of old age, and his divine kingdom quickly fell apart. More than 4,500 years ago, martial god Nangong mysteriously disappeared without a trace. In the following decades, his divine kingdom also fell apart, and the entire Shenwu continent entered an era of chaos. It was only 3,000 years ago that the Shenwu continent structure was reshuffled, and 3 new overlords were born. They are the 3 divine kingdoms of today. According to the time, martial god Nangong's limit of 10,000 years should have been 4,000 years ago." Huanglong Daoist nodded again, "That's right. Ever since martial god Nangong disappeared, he never appeared again. He must have reached his limit and passed away on the spot. In the thousands of years since then, many powerhouses have been investigating this matter. Countless martial saints have dreamed of finding martial god Nangong's cave and obtaining his divine inheritance, as well as the many divine weapons he had refined when he was alive. Now, someone has finally found a secret realm in the ruins of God, and it seems to be martial god Nangong's cave. Master, you can imagine how many people have heard the news and are on their way to the ruins of God now." Ji Tianqing didn't say anything. He was secretly guessing something. Huanglong Daoist continued, "Master, you are the famous Kenshin, the only person who has ascended in the past 30,000 years, and the God King who has dominated the universe. This disciple knows that you definitely look down on martial god Nangong's cave. In comparison, martial god Nangong doesn't even have the qualifications to be your servant. However, it will take a long time for you to recover to your peak. What you need the most right now is 1 or 2 divine weapons to fight martial god Tianju and the ancestor fiend god." Hearing this, Ji Tianqing couldn't help but nod and say, "Yes, Master has a body of secret techniques and divine arts, but I don't have any divine artifacts to use. Not only can I not defeat martial god Tianju and the ancestor fiend god, I can't even fight the leader of the other races, Yu. Previously, he and Yunyao teamed up to fight Yu because they didn't have any divine weapons. He didn't doubt that if he and Yunyao both had divine weapons, they could definitely defeat Yu. It would take about 3 years to restore the Sword of Burial of Heaven to divine grade, which was too long. Huanglong Daoist saw that Ji Tianqing didn't object. He continued, "Master, now that the 2 martial gods are in seclusion, martial god Luo Shui won't fight with you. As long as you go to the ruins of God, no one can stop you. You can definitely enter the illusory void secret realm and obtain martial god Nangong's treasures and divine weapons. This way, we won't have to be afraid of you and the ancestor fiend god anymore. Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a while, then nodded, yes, I understand what you mean. However, this matter is very important, and it's a little strange. Let me think about it. Huanglong Daoist understood his worries, and said with a smile, if martial god Tianju and the demon race discovered the illusory void secret realm, we have to be careful. However, it was the people from the vast divine nation who discovered it first, and the news also came from there. In my opinion, there shouldn't be any problem. Yes. Ji Tianqing nodded again, and waved his hand, this matter isn't urgent. You can leave now, I'll tell you after I've thought about it. After that, Ji Tianqing got up and left the study, and returned to his residence. As soon as he returned to his room, he saw Yunyao sitting at the table, holding a jade slip in her hand, lost in thought. She only woke up when she heard Ji Tianqing's footsteps. Ji Tianqing glanced at the jade slip, and asked, Yao Yao, who sent this jade slip? What's the matter? Chapter 2302. Hearing Yunyao's words, Ji Tianqing immediately smiled. If I'm not wrong, it should be about the illusory void secret realm, right? How did you know? Yunyao asked subconsciously. However, she immediately reacted and said with a smile, oh, Huanglong Daoist came to find you just now to tell you this? Ji Tianqing nodded and sat down beside her. He looked at her with a serious expression and asked, Yao Yao, what do you think about this? Yunyao said with a calm expression, I just thought about it. This should be an unexpected situation. It can be considered a pleasant surprise. The news has already spread across the continent. However, only the experts of the three divine kingdoms and the various factions know about it. Needless to say, all the martial saints will flock to the ruins of God to explore the illusory void secret realm. After all, the illusory void secret realm is very likely to be martial god Nangong's cave dwelling. This means that martial god Nangong's remains, divine Tao inheritance, treasures, and divine artifacts are very likely to be hidden in the secret realm. This temptation is too great. No martial saint can resist it. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and asked, so you're saying that we should also go to the ruins of God and try our luck? Yunyao thought for a moment and said in a serious tone, you have endless battle experience and vast knowledge. You have mastered thousands of divine arts and secret arts. However, you still need a long time to recover your divine realm. Moreover, you don't have any divine artifacts to use their power. I originally had a reverse water divine sword, but I returned it to divine Lord Luo River last time at the North Underworld Mountain. If not for that, we wouldn't have been unable to defeat you when we joined forces. Moreover, martial god Nangong's cave dwelling must have hundreds of mysteries and seals. Ordinary martial saints can't break the seals of the cave dwelling. That's called trying their luck. However, we are different. With your knowledge and wisdom, you can easily enter. Ji Tianqing thought about it for a moment, then smiled and nodded, okay, since you think so, then let's go. In any case, we just ended our seclusion not long ago, so it's not suitable for us to cultivate in seclusion again in the short term. Let's go to the ruins of God and take it as an experience. Yunyao smiled and said, even a martial god like you can't do anything to us if we join forces. We can go anywhere in the world. Ji Tianqing urged, since we've decided, we'll set off tomorrow morning. Before I leave, I still have some things to take care of. You should rest first. Then, he left the room alone and entered the secret chamber. Opening the secret door in the corner of the secret room, he went through the dark tunnel and landed in the star divine furnace underground. The silver divine flames in the divine cauldron surged like waves. A black boulder that was as large as a mountain and more than 100 miles long was quietly floating in the furnace. On the left and right sides of the boulder, the Black Dragon and Qian Yu were tirelessly using secret techniques to refine the boulder. This boulder was the star crystal core. It had shrunk by 30%, and was only 140 miles long. The surface of the star crystal core, which was originally dark and rough, had become much smoother, and silver light spots could be vaguely seen. The Black Dragon and Qian Yu had been busy, and although they were tired, they still refused to rest. After careful observation, Ji Tianqing found that their strength had increased a lot, and their magic power had become more vigorous and profound. He was very satisfied with this result and was very gratified. He praised the Black Dragon and Qian Yu, and he also personally taught them how to cast spells. In this way, not only could he increase their efficiency in refining the star crystal core, but he could also increase their strength faster. 1 hour later, Ji Tianqing left the star divine furnace. When he returned to the room, Yunyao was already sitting cross-legged on the bed, and she began to meditate. Ji Tianqing didn't delay any longer and sat beside her to meditate. The night passed silently. The next morning, Ji Tianqing was the first to end his cultivation. He found the Huanglong Taoist and told him his decision. When the Huanglong Taoist learned that he was going to the ruins of God, he was both happy and worried. He hurriedly said, "Since Master has decided to explore the illusory void secret realm in the ruins of God, it will definitely be a smooth journey and you will return with a full load. Master, please don't worry. I will guard the pillar of heaven's mountains firmly and won't let you have any worries." However, all the martial arts masters on the continent may rush to explore the ruins of God. Even if Master and Mistress are very powerful, you must be careful. I will wait for your safe return. Ji Tianqing patted him on the shoulder and didn't say anything. He turned around and left. A quarter of an hour later, he and Yunyao rode the glazed fiery dragon and flew into the sky as fast as lightning, heading northwest. The pillar of heaven's mountains was not far from the ruins of God. With the speed of the glazed fiery dragon, they could arrive there in 3 days. However, after Ji Tianqing and Yunyao entered the ruins of God, they still had to continue flying northwest. After all, the illusory void secret realm appeared in the northwest of the ruins of God, next to the fallen God Lake. The communication jade slip sent by Granny Long contained a lot of information about the illusory void secret realm, including its location. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao came for the illusory void secret realm. They didn't want to cause any trouble on the way, so they went straight to the fallen God Lake. The fallen God Lake in the northwest of the ruins of God was a huge lake with a radius of 200,000 miles. It hadn't dried up for tens of thousands of years. This lake originated from the ancient times. It was said that it was created during the War of the Gods. There was also a sad but touching legend about the origin of the fallen God Lake. Since they were bored on the way, Ji Tianqing told Yunyao about the legend while chatting with her. After hearing it, Yunyao was a little touched. She said calmly, "Although there are thousands of legends in the world, most of them are absurd and bizarre. However, legends that have been passed down for tens of thousands of years from the ancient times are definitely traceable. I'm 80% sure that it's true." Ji Tianqing nodded. He didn't talk about the fallen God Lake anymore. Instead, he changed the topic to Nangong Martial God. According to historical records, Nangong Martial God was only obsessed with 2 things in his life. One was martial arts, and the other was artifact forging. Although he established a divine nation and was one of the overlords of the continent, he was tired of power long ago. I once read in the unofficial history that Nangong Martial God was an infatuated man. When he was young, he met a beautiful woman who was as beautiful as a fairy. She was noble, elegant, and pure. In order to pursue that beautiful woman, Nangong Martial God didn't hesitate to betray his sect and abandon his family's power. He only wanted to wander the world with that beauty, enjoying the pleasures of the world. However, the good times didn't last long. The 2 of them lived in seclusion overseas for more than 20 years. However, they offended a top force in the Eastern Sea. The leader of that force wanted to snatch his wife as a concubine. The two sides fought fiercely. Nangong martial god was seriously injured and fled. In order to protect her reputation and purity, his wife didn't hesitate to commit suicide. Her body and soul were destroyed. Since then, Nangong martial god never married again. He also didn't fall in love with any woman. Chapter 2303. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao only treated the legend of Nangong martial god as a story and did not pay too much attention to it. After all, their goal was to enter the illusory void secret realm and obtain Nangong martial god's treasures and artifacts. On the evening of the sixth day, the sun was setting in the west. The glazed fire dragon carried Ji Tianqing and Yunyao across the vast fallen god lake and arrived at the northern shore. The glazed fire dragon stopped in the sky above a mountain range that stretched for tens of thousands of kilometers and was more than 10,000 meters tall. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao stood on the dragon's back and looked at the mountains in front of them, silently observing them. In front of them was a boundless mountain range that was covered in verdant peaks and a boundless forest. Behind them was the vast and boundless fallen god lake, which sparkled with light and was tranquil and peaceful. After Ji Tianqing observed for a while, he said calmly, "From the looks of it, the entrance to the illusory void secret realm should be in this region. As for its exact location, we still need to investigate further." Yunyao nodded and said calmly, "We don't need to rush. We can slowly search for it. The illusory void secret realm is protected by a seal. Even if someone finds it before us, they won't be able to break the seal." "That's true." Ji Tianqing smiled. "Even if a few thousand years have passed and the sealing array's power has weakened, it still has the might of a deity. There are less than 3 martial saints in the entire Shenwu continent who can break a deity's sealing array." As the two spoke, they rode on the glazed fire dragon and flew into the depths of the mountains. Along the way, the two released their divine senses to cover 1,000 kilometers and carefully investigate every corner. Along the way, the two saw a few groups of martial sacred realm experts flying across the sky. These martial saints were traveling in groups. Some had 2 or 3 people, while others had 4 or 5 people. Some were walking in the air, their bodies streaking across the sky like flowing lights. Some of them were riding on powerful spirit beasts or flying magic treasures. When the crowd saw the glazed fire dragon, they slowed down and could not help but take a few more glances. On the Shenwu continent, there were very few people who had a divine dragon as a mount. Of course, the martial sages from all over the world did not dare to get close to the glazed fire dragon. Everyone had a tacit understanding and didn't greet each other. Once they found the entrance to the illusory void secret land, conflicts might erupt between them. Between them, there was actually a competitive and hostile relationship. Deep in the mountains. At the peak of a mountain that was 2,000 feet tall and lush with lush trees. 4 luxuriously dressed experts with extraordinary bearings were standing on top of a towering ancient tree, overlooking the surrounding mountains. There were 4 young martial artists, 2 men and 2 women. They were all very handsome and beautiful. The leader was a tall young man wearing a golden dragon robe and a luxurious gemstone crown. His face was handsome but a little pale. His eyes were malicious and contained a bone-chilling coldness. If Ji Tianqing was present, he would definitely be able to recognize at a glance that this person was Heaven and Divine Nation's Grand Divine Son, Yuan Zhen. The other 3 young experts were Martial Saint Qing Shan, Martial Saint Chen Yu and Martial Saint Chao Ying. The 3 of them stood separately, but with Yuan Zhen as the center, vaguely showing a clustered attitude. Yuan Zhen looked into the distance and narrowed his eyes slightly, hiding a never-melting coldness. He said in a low voice, "I will never forget the tragic scene of Yuan Chong dying in the void platform. In the past few months, my evil name has spread all over the continent and I have been criticized and despised by millions of martial artists. And all of this is because of Ji Tianqing. Even if I cut him into pieces and put him to death, it won't be able to quell the hatred in my heart. His resentful tone was full of cruelty and murderous intent. Marshal Saint Ching Shan nodded and stroked the thumb ring on his left hand with his right hand. He sneered and said, "Your Highness, don't worry. The Divine Master's plan is absolutely flawless. No matter how cunning Ji Tianqing is, he will definitely be fooled and obediently come here to die. Just now, I received news that someone discovered traces of Ji Tianqing near the fallen god lake. He and his wife Yunyao came here on a glazed fire dragon and are searching for the entrance to the illusory void secret realm." Marshal Saint Chenyu, who was wearing a pink floral dress, also said with a face full of hatred, "Back in Wangtian City, that bastard Ji Tianqing humiliated me in every possible way. I will never forget this enmity. In this operation, I will definitely kill him with my own hands and tear his mouth apart." Marshal Saint Chao Ying was the only one who was still calm. He said with an indifferent expression, "Although the four of us are working together, we are still not a match for Ji Tianqing and his wife. Your Highness, has Marshal Saint Luxue arrived? When will he meet us?" Yuanzhen nodded and said in a low voice, "Father gave him full authority to handle this matter. How can he be later than us? However, he is with the Alliance Master and has to command another group of people. He has no time to meet us." Hearing these two sentences, everyone was stunned and showed an expression of disbelief. The Alliance Master is also here. Didn't he admit defeat and stop following Ji Tianqing? Marshal Saint Ching Shan asked subconsciously. However, he immediately reacted and did not continue speaking. After all, he was very clear that for experts of this level, all bets and promises were child's play. The winner takes all. Marshal Saint Chao Ying raised her eyebrows and asked with interest, "Other than us, there is another group of people? Could it be those clans and forces that are dependent on the divine nation?" Yuanzhen shook his head and sneered, "Of course not. The clans and forces that are dependent on the divine nation also sent for martial saints. However, they are not the main force. The real main force is the other group of people that we have never seen before." Everyone vaguely guessed that since it was a martial saint expert that they had never seen before, it was most likely a hermit expert. Marshal Saint Chenyu frowned and could not help but exclaim, "If that's the case, don't we have more than 10 martial saints? In order to deal with Ji Tianqing, is it worth mobilizing so many people and more than 10 martial saints?" Yuanzhen glanced at her and sneered, "Mobilize so many martial saints? Do you know that even if we have more than 10 martial saints, we are not fully confident that we can kill Ji Tianqing? In order to kill Ji Tianqing, how much did Father pay? Even this illusory sky secret realm will be exposed to the world." Everyone was secretly speechless and did not speak. At the same time, they were even more in awe and fear of Ji Tianqing. Similar thoughts appeared in everyone's mind. How strong is that guy? Why is the Divine Master so cautious? More than 10 martial saints joined forces to deal with him, but they are still not fully confident. How strong is his strength and methods? If we fail this time, won't we become the laughingstock of the entire continent? Ji Tianqing's name will spread throughout the continent and reach the peak. Chapter 2304. At the same time. In the depths of the towering mountains. On a lone peak that was more than 10,000 feet high, the mountain was precipitous and covered with rocks. 5 experts who were dressed strangely but had a dignified aura were standing on a patch of grass and talking quietly. The leader of the group was a hunchbacked old man with white hair. He was dressed in gray linen clothes and was leaning on a black wooden cane. Even though his body was stooped, his cloth shirt, cloth shoes, and long gray hair were clean and tidy, not a single hair out of place. The other 4 powerhouses did not dare to slight him in the slightest. All of them had a respectful attitude towards him. Among the 4 experts, 3 were middle-aged men and 1 was a charming and enchanting woman with a noble aura. The man on the left had a handsome face. His hair was tied up in a bun and he wore a feathered crown. He wore a white robe with silver threads and carried a half-meter-wide sword case on his back. This person's eyes were like lightning and his aura was as sharp as a sword. He was obviously a sword Dao martial saint. The middle-aged man standing in the middle was not tall and was slightly plump. His skin was also very white and tender. He was dressed in a green robe and wore a square gemstone crown. He looked very amiable. At first glance, he looked like a rich man in the secular world. Although his appearance was ordinary and inconspicuous, his aura was long and deep. He was obviously a martial saint expert. The most eye-catching person was the third middle-aged man. This person was nearly 10 feet tall and was burly like an iron tower. His skin was bronze and his muscles bulged. He was full of violent strength. Moreover, he was not wearing a robe but a dark red tiger skin jacket. On his shoulders was a dark gold python skin cloak. Even the lower half of his body was only wearing a pair of short leather pants with dragon scales. His wide feet were bare. From head to toe, this person was filled with a wild, unrestrained aura. But it just so happened that there was an enchanting and charming woman beside such a boorish and barbaric man. This woman was tall and had a hot body. Her face was exquisite and beautiful. She looked like a woman in her 20s. She was wearing a long golden dress that was more than 10 feet long, and a luxurious crown that was studded with gems on her head. Her entire body was exuding a unique charm and nobility. In her clear eyes, a pair of soul-sucking eyes inadvertently revealed a natural charm. She was a peerless beauty that was charming, dignified, and enchanting. She could really be called a stunner. If Ji Tianqing were here, he would definitely be able to recognize him at a glance. This enchanting woman was Empress Tantai Xian. When she stood next to the man clad in animal skin, it was like a living beauty standing next to a beast. The contrast was too obvious. The other two middle-aged men were very envious of the man in animal skin. They glanced at Tantai Xian from time to time, scanning her half-exposed chest. The two towering snow-capped mountains were too eye-catching. The hunchbacked old man in the lead gazed at the setting sun with a deep gaze as he spoke in a low voice. Since we've decided to leave the North Sea and enter the Shinwu continent, there is no turning back. This operation can only succeed, failure is not allowed. Only by killing Ji Tianqing and completing the mission can we take back the Luna Star Paradise that belongs to us. I've had enough of Mount Fengling. The hunchbacked old man was very old, and he had lived for at least 3,000 to 4,000 years. He had been born in the Luna Star Paradise, but he had encountered an unforeseen event when he was young. He had left with the three great families and migrated to the North Sea's Mount Fengling. He had not returned to the Luna Star Paradise for more than 3,000 years. The white-robed man with the sword case nodded in agreement and said to the hunchbacked old man, "Master Tong, please rest assured. We know that this is your lifelong wish, and it is also the long-cherished wish of the three great families. Since I am the Jiang family's young master, I will do my best to complete the mission and achieve the clan's goal." The middle-aged fat man in green robes nodded and said confidently, "We haven't set foot on the Shinwu continent for more than 3,000 years. I'm afraid that the world has long forgotten the prestige of the three great families. In this operation, I, Hellion Wuxia, will let the martial saints of the world witness the methods of the Hellion family." The tall and sturdy man in the animal skin jacket stroked his beard and grinned. "Hee hee. It's too much for Xian to accompany me in Mount Fengling. No matter what, I will crush Ji Tianqing's head and take back the Luna Star Paradise from martial god Tianju. When the time comes, I will build the most gorgeous crystal palace for my Xian After saying that, the tall and sturdy man looked at Tantai Xian with a doting expression and reached out to pinch her pretty face. Tantai Xian smiled charmingly and hugged his arm even tighter. However, no one noticed that a faint smile flashed in the depths of her eyes. It was a little playful. The Jiang family's young master in Helian Wuxia looked at the tall and sturdy man at the same time and teased him with envy. "Brother Tuoba, you are so lucky to have won Miss Xian's heart. You should give her a status and a palace to repay her. Tuoba, you are also very lucky to have Miss Xian give herself to you. If Miss Xian had met with danger in the Yin ruins, would have been the one passing by. Now that she has given herself to you, the person she wants to repay is also me. Miss Xian following a monkey-rearing boorish man like you is simply a waste of God's gift." A fresh flower stuck in cow dung. Tuoba was not angry. Instead, he laughed even louder and hugged Tantai Xian's waist even tighter. "Ha ha ha. Jiang Qi, Helian Wuxia, the two of you are just jealous of me. Don't be fooled by your looks. When it comes to serving women, I am better at it. If you don't believe me, you can ask Xian. What can I do? Who asked me to be so rich?" As he spoke, Tuoba lifted up his animal skin jacket and revealed his bulging dragon skin shorts. Jiang Qi and Helian Wuxia looked at him with disdain and quickly changed the topic. You are so vulgar. You are so vulgar when you have a beauty beside you. You are dirtying the scenery." Seeing that the two of them had turned their heads away, Tuoba laughed even louder. "Ha ha ha. Why are the two of you pretending to be decent? We grew up together. I have seen the big and small of you. Now I have hit your sore spot, right?" Seeing that he was getting more and more explicit, Jiang Qi and Helian Wuxia did not dare to continue the conversation. The two of them looked at the mountains in the distance and pretended to talk about how beautiful the scenery was and how nice the weather was. Tantai Xian also pretended that she did not hear anything. She looked at the sunset calmly. But deep in her eyes, there was a deep sense of disdain and disgust. At this time, the hunchbacked old man spoke in a low and dignified voice. "All right, stop fooling around. The three family heads cannot come personally. The three of you are the most outstanding geniuses and the future candidates for the family heads. You should be calm and steady. I just received news from Yi Lushui that the target has appeared. We should start moving." Chapter 2305. Night had fallen. The rolling mountains were sleeping under the night sky, quiet and gloomy. There were no stars in the sky. Only dark clouds drifted by, and the biting cold wind whistled. The glazed fire dragon carried Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao and flew over the mountains at a moderate speed. 2 whole hours passed. The two of them searched an area with a radius of 30,000 miles, but they did not find the entrance to the illusory void secret realm. However, during the search, they encountered several groups of martial artists who were in a hurry. Those martial artists were in groups of 3 to 5. There must be 1 or 2 martial sages among them, and the rest were all tribulation transcendence experts. Even martial lords in the 5th or 6th level of the tribulation transcendence realm could only be the guards and attendants of the martial sages. Everyone knew that only martial sages were qualified to explore the illusory void secret realm and obtain the treasures of Nangong martial god. Those tribulation transcendence realm experts were just here to join in the fun, broaden their horizons, and try their luck. Very quickly, another 4 hours passed. It was midnight. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao searched an area with a radius of 50,000 miles, but they still did not find the target. Therefore, the glazed fire dragon temporarily stopped and floated in the clouds. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao looked at each other and frowned in confusion. According to the news circulating outside, the entrance to the illusory void secret realm is nearby. We have searched an area with a radius of 80,000 miles. Logically speaking, we should find it soon, right? Ji Tianqing frowned and looked around. His deep eyes shone brightly. Yun Yao nodded and comforted him gently, "Don't worry. We have plenty of time. The person who finds the entrance first may not be the first to enter. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and said, we don't have enough information. We can observe the movements of others. Maybe we can find the entrance faster. That's good. Yunyao nodded in agreement. Then, the glazed fire dragon continued to fly in the night sky. Ji Tianqing and Yunyao checked the surroundings. At the same time, they were also paying attention to the movements of others. An hour later, a dazzling golden light flew over from afar. It rushed into the depths of the mountain range as fast as lightning. Ji Tianqing turned his head and saw a flying ship about 100 meters long wrapped in the golden light. The flying boat was in the shape of a shuttle, and its surface was engraved with mysterious patterns. Its shape was very exquisite. Without hesitation, he teleported over and turned into a ball of dazzling starlight, blocking the front of the flying boat. The flying boat that was galloping did not slow down in the slightest and directly crashed into Ji Tianqing. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows. Without hesitation, he raised his right hand and struck out with a dazzling golden palm. Boom! With a muffled sound, the mountain-sized golden palm grabbed the flying boat and held it firmly in its palm. The incomparably violent impact was also neutralized by the giant golden palm. Even though the flying boat flashed with golden light and unleashed a powerful force, it was still unable to break free from the grasp of the giant palm. Ji Tianqing grabbed the flying boat back in front of him and controlled the giant palm expressionlessly. He gradually crushed the flying boat, causing it to constantly deform and shrink. If he did not stop, the flying boat would be crushed into a pile of debris in 10 breaths at most. At this moment, the door of the flying boat opened, and 2 figures hurriedly flew out. Swoosh swoosh. 2 tall and beautiful figures appeared in front of Ji Tianqing. They were 2 beautiful young girls in long green dresses. They were about 18 years old and had long black hair that draped over their shoulders like a black waterfall. What surprised Ji Tianqing the most was that the 2 young girls in green had the same appearance and eyes. They were a pair of twin sisters. The 2 young girls in green had a frosty expression. They glared at Ji Tianqing angrily, their clear eyes flashing with anger and ferocity. Hey! You bastard, why are you blocking our way? Despicable guy, we have no enmity with you. Why are you attacking us? The 2 sisters questioned at the same time. Their voices were clear and melodious, very pleasant to listen to. Even their angry rebuke had a hint of playfulness and lightness. Ji Tianqing looked at the 2 of them without changing his expression. He was about to open his mouth and explain his purpose of coming. At this moment, Yunyao rushed over on the glazed fire dragon. She came to Ji Tianqing's side and looked at the twins with a gentle expression. She said in a calm tone, "Sisters, please forgive us for disturbing you. Tianqing doesn't mean any harm. He just wants to ask you some questions. Unfortunately, you don't have any intention of stopping, so he resorted to this." Yunyao was originally a noble and elegant fairy. Now that she had been pregnant for many years, she had a bit of motherly radiance. When the twins saw her, they were stunned. When they heard her gentle words, the anger of the 2 sisters immediately dissipated. The 2 of them glared at Ji Tianqing angrily and couldn't help but mutter, "Umph. What a rude guy. How hateful. This sister is really good at talking. For her sake, we won't argue with you." Ji Tianqing almost couldn't help but roll his eyes. He thought to himself, even if Yao Yao is popular, is my popularity so bad? What do you mean by not arguing with me for her sake? You 2 look so weak. What do you have to argue with me? The twins were still young. They were still a little childish, and their strength was only about the 3rd stage of the crossing calamity realm. If Ji Tianqing was a bad guy, he could kill the 2 of them in one move. Yunyao easily won the favor of the 2 sisters and started chatting with them. "Sisters, you 2 are so beautiful and cute. You are even twins. It's really rare in the world. What are your names? Who is the elder sister and who is the younger sister? The two sisters answered in unison, My name is Qingqing, and her name is Qingqing. I am the elder sister, and she is the younger sister. Their voices were the same. The speed and tone of their speech were also the same. After speaking, the two of them looked at each other. They pouted unhappily and frowned. Seeing this scene, Yunyao was amused. He. It seems that the two of you are very interesting. May I ask, why are the two of you in such a hurry? Did something happen? Qingqing, who was on the left, quickly nodded and said with a worried face, Sister guessed right. We did encounter some trouble and were in a hurry to save Master. Originally, Master brought us here to search for treasures. But on the way, Master met an enemy. She separated from us temporarily and led the enemy away alone. Not long ago, Master sent a message saying that she defeated the enemy, but the enemy fled to the entrance of the mystic realm. The enemy's accomplices were there. Now, Master is besieged by them. I don't know if she is alive or dead. When Qingqing was talking about her experience, secretly gave her a look, indicating that she should not say anything. After all, the two of them were not familiar with Ji Tianqing and his wife. It was not appropriate for them to reveal their real experience. However, Yin Yao's appearance, temperament, and demeanor were too fairy-like. Chapter 2306. After listening to Qingqing's words, Ji Tianqing and Yin Yao looked at each other. Their master actually knows the location of the secret realm's entrance. The two of them transmitted their voices to each other at the same time and said the same thing. The two of them could see that the twin sisters were obviously inexperienced and naive. This kind of young and immature martial artist was bound to suffer all kinds of setbacks in this unpredictable world of martial arts. However, they were lucky enough to meet Ji Tianqing and Yin Yao. At least, the couple would not harm the twin sisters. Yin Yao said to Qingqing, No wonder you are in such a hurry. Your master is in a tight encirclement. It is indeed worrying. My husband has damaged your flying boat, which will definitely delay your journey. How about this? Let us send the two of you to find your master. Consider it our compensation. Seeing that she took the initiative to invite them, frowned and subconsciously wanted to refuse. However, Qingqing stared at the glazed fiery dragon without blinking. Her eyes were full of curiosity and expectation. She only thought for a moment and simply nodded in agreement. Sister, since you are so kind to invite us, we will naturally accept your invitation. May I ask what kind of dragon this is? Is it your mount? Qingqing. Quickly grabbed Qingqing's arm and gave her a look. She transmitted her voice to her, Qingqing, how can you trust others so easily? Have you forgotten Master's instructions? What if these two are bad people or Master's enemies? Aren't we sending lambs to the tiger's den? Qingqing pouted and said hesitantly, Master told us to watch more and talk less when we are outside. We can't have the intention to harm others, but we must be vigilant. However, this sister is very nice. I have carefully observed her eyes. She is definitely not a bad person. Moreover, with their strength, if they really had evil intentions, we would have been killed long ago. Why won't you listen to me? Could not help but stomp her feet. She was angry and anxious. However, Qingqing ignored her and flew to the back of the glazed fiery dragon with Yin Yao. She looked around curiously. Ji Tianqing remained silent and returned to the dragon's back. Seeing this, hesitated for a long time before flying onto the dragon's back and landing beside Qingqing. Of course, she had been holding on to Qingqing's arm and was secretly guarding against Ji Tianqing. She was afraid that he would suddenly turn into a vicious thug. On the way, Qingqing kept chatting with Yin Yao. She asked all sorts of questions like a curious baby. Yunyao answered her patiently. Her expression and tone were always gentle, making people feel like they were bathing in the spring breeze. An hour later, Qing had become familiar with her and completely trusted her. She had completely let down her guard. Ji Tianqing knew that Yunyao had a natural advantage when it came to gaining the trust of others. Unlike him, who was excessively handsome and heroic, yet also extremely mysterious, which always made people doubly wary of him. Since that was the case, he decided not to interrupt and continued to look at the scenery. Very quickly, 2 hours passed. Under Qing's guidance, the glazed fire dragon flew continuously for more than 70,000 miles and stopped in the sky above a large canyon. This was a huge canyon that was tens of thousands of miles long and spanned from north to south. On both sides of the canyon were towering mountain ranges that were as high as 30,000 feet, covered by a lush forest. On one side of the canyon, there was a steep cliff that was tens of thousands of feet high, revealing a large area of grayish-brown rocks. The canyon was bottomless and was covered by a thick white fog, making people unable to see the situation at the bottom of the canyon. Ji Tianqing and the others stood on the dragon's back and looked down at the canyon below. Qing looked around anxiously and muttered to herself, "Master was besieged near here. I wonder how she is now and where is she?" When Ji Tianqing and Yunyao heard this, they understood that this canyon was the entrance to the illusory void mystic realm. Both of them released their divine senses and probed into the canyon to conduct a thorough search. At this time, Yi took out a communication jade slip. "Instead of worrying here, why don't we send another message to Master and ask about her specific location?" As she spoke, she was about to enter a message into the jade slip. However, Ji Tianqing, who had been silent all this while, suddenly spoke. He frowned and looked at the north end of the canyon. He said calmly, "There are powerhouses fighting 3,000 miles ahead. Let's go and take a look." Qing was instantly energized and her eyes were filled with hope. "Really? Then it's very likely that it's Master." Yi hesitated for a moment and put away the jade slip. She decided to go and take a look first. Swoosh! The glazed fire dragon flew over the canyon and turned into a golden flame, heading toward the north. In just a few minutes, it had flown 3,000 miles away. At this time, Ji Tianqing, Yunyao, and the others could see that there were a few powerhouses fighting in the sky 100 miles ahead. There were a total of 4 people, all of whom were martial sages. However, they were divided into 2 groups. One of the groups consisted of 3 people. There was a white-haired old man, a middle-aged man with a dignified appearance, and a hideous old woman in a black robe. The 3 of them waved their Dharma treasures and weapons, casting spells that covered the sky and covered the sun. They surrounded and attacked a middle-aged woman in a dark purple dress. The middle-aged woman was not tall and her face was a little thin. Her long hair was tied up in a high bun and she wore a green jade Taoist crown. She held a wash-basin-sized jade slip in her left hand and a silver-white sword in her right hand. She was casting spells with all her might to defend herself. However, her clothes were ragged and covered in blood. Her face was also covered in blood. She looked rather pathetic. Facing the pincer attack of the 3 martial sages, she could only retreat and fight at the same time. She did not dare to fight them head-on. Her Dharma power aura was also fluctuating violently and somewhat chaotic. It was obvious that she was at the end of her rope and was only holding on with her last breath. At most, she would be defeated miserably and killed by the 3 martial sages on the spot in 15 minutes. Qing and Yi's bodies shook when they saw this scene, and they revealed a complicated expression of joy, grief, and indignation. "Master! Master, don't panic. We're here to save you." The 2 of them shouted in a crisp voice. They pulled out their swords almost at the same time and rushed out without caring about their own safety. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing immediately frowned. These 2 silly girls, how could you interfere in a battle between martial sacred realm experts? Yun Yao also frowned. Two rays of silver light shot out from her hands and turned into two giant palms, grabbing at Qing and Yi. Swoosh! Qing and Yi had just flown 1,000 feet away when they were caught by the two giant palms and pulled back onto the back of the glaze fire dragon. Yun Yao looked at the two of them and said in a dignified tone, "I can understand your eagerness to save your master. However, if you rush up like this, how is it different from courting death?" Qing and Yi struggled with all their might and asked anxiously, "Then what can we do? Do we just watch our master be besieged by evil people? Sister Fairy, please let us go." Chapter 2307. Qing and Yi were twin sisters. On the night they were born, their entire family had been exterminated by their enemies. The two infant sisters had fallen into a sea of fire and were about to die. At the critical moment, the Puhua martial saint had passed by and righteously saved them. Later on, the martial saint had brought them back to Mount Puhua in the East Sea, where he had personally raised them and cared for them. For 20 years, the two sisters had never left Mount Puhua. They had lived a carefree life isolated from the rest of the world, which had nurtured their innocent and pure personalities. This treasure hunt in the ruins of God was their first time entering the Shenwu continent. But they had never imagined that such an unfortunate calamity would befall them. They had watched with their own eyes as the Puhua martial saint was besieged by three villains. He was riddled with wounds and bleeding profusely. He had been beaten into a retreat, but he had been powerless to help. The two felt as if a knife had been twisted in their hearts, and tears welled up in their clear eyes. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao did not know the inside story. However, they could see that the two sisters' feelings for their master were pure and flawless, and they were as close as mother and daughter. Yun Yao looked at the two sisters who were crying their hearts out and could not help but sigh. Then, she turned to look at Ji Tianqing and said, "Tianqing, can you help them? Just treat it as compensation for them." Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao were telepathically connected, so he naturally understood what she meant. She was referring to Qingqing leading the way for them to the entrance of the secret realm. "You're just too soft-hearted." Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded, looking at Yun Yao with a doting gaze. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure flashed and disappeared into the sky. Whoosh! In the next instant, he teleported hundreds of kilometers away and appeared behind the three martial saints. Heaven-seizing palm. Ji Tianqing growled and raised his hands to unleash two mountain-sized golden palms that ruthlessly slammed towards the two martial saints. The three martial saints were attacking the Puhua martial saint with all their might. They only wanted to kill him as soon as possible and end the battle. They had not been on guard at all, and a stranger had actually interfered in their business. Bang bang. Following two muffled explosions, the white-haired old man and the black-robed old woman were struck by the giant golden palm on the spot. They spat out mouthfuls of blood and were sent flying. The two of them were only rank 5 martial sages and could not withstand Ji Tianqing's secret skill. They were severely injured on the spot. The two of them flew for 30 miles before they managed to stop in the sky, panting heavily. At the same time, the burly and dignified middle-aged man turned his head to look at Ji Tianqing. He shouted in shock and anger, "Who are you? Why are you interfering in our feud? Do you know the consequences of offending the Sunset Alliance?" Ji Tianqing glanced at him and said expressionlessly, "What Sunset Alliance? I've never heard of it." As he spoke, he waved his hand and struck out a huge sword made of stars that could split the heavens and earth apart, slashing down at the middle-aged man's head. The middle-aged man's expression changed drastically, and he quickly teleported away. Shwa! In an instant, he retreated 80 miles. However, the huge sword made of stars had locked onto his spiritual soul aura. It also teleported 80 miles and struck him with a bang. The middle-aged man was instantly struck until blood splattered everywhere. He fell rapidly from the sky and crashed heavily into the Grand Canyon. Bang! A loud muffled sound came from the depths of the canyon, reverberating endlessly in the canyon. The ground and the mountains on both sides trembled, and countless rocks fell. At this point, the three martial sages had been severely injured by Ji Tianqing. Puhua martial sage was temporarily safe. He flew to 100 steps away from Ji Tianqing and sized him up in shock. "Thank you for saving us, young master. May I know your name?" As he spoke, Puhua martial sage bowed to Ji Tianqing to express his gratitude. Although Ji Tianqing was very young, he had only used 3 moves to severely injure the 3 martial sages. With such terrifying strength, Puhua martial sage did not dare to underestimate him. His expression was respectful. Ji Tianqing cupped his hands and returned the greeting. He said calmly, "It's nothing. Don't mention it." Then, he pointed to the glazed fire dragon not far away and said, "Your 2 beloved disciples are very worried about your safety." Puhua martial sage turned his head to look. When he saw the glazed fire dragon's appearance, his pupils shrank, and shock flashed across his eyes. He then saw Qingqing and Yi on the dragon's back. They were in a petrified state. Their eyes were wide with shock, and their small mouths were slightly agape. There was no trace of worry or anxiety on the 2 sisters' faces. There was only shock and disbelief. Very clearly, Qingqing and Yi both did not expect that Ji Tianqing was actually powerful to such an extent. In the blink of an eye, he had sent the 3 martial sages flying. It was a complete sweep, a complete suppression. Wasn't this too terrifying? Even their most respected and worshipped master was completely defeated by Ji Tianqing. Puhua martial sage glanced at Yun Yao, who was beside the 2 sisters, and shock flashed across his eyes. His mind was clear, and he immediately understood that Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao definitely had extraordinary identities. Moreover, it seemed that the 2 sisters had met a benefactor. At this moment, the 3 heavily injured martial sages flew over from afar. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The 3 of them stood still in the sky 1,000 feet away. All of them had ugly expressions, and their bodies were stained with blood. The white-haired old man and the black-robed old woman's internal injuries were more serious, but they did not look miserable on the outside. The middle-aged man in the lead was in a miserable state. His entire right arm was cut off, and blood soaked his long robe. The 3 of them glared angrily at Ji Tianqing and Puhua martial sage. Their expressions were ferocious, and their entire bodies were bursting with killing intent and anger. "Puhua, I didn't expect you to hook up with such a young man at your age." The black-robed old woman shouted, full of resentment. The white-haired old man also said sinisterly, "Puhua, even if that brat can protect you for a while, he can't protect you forever. You're lucky today, but we'll settle our scores in the future. Sooner or later, your head will be separated from your body." Puhua martial sage's expression immediately turned cold, and he shouted angrily, "Black-white double demons, don't slander us. This young master only helped out because he saw injustice. You can only blame yourselves for committing so many evil deeds." The black-white double demons immediately understood that Ji Tianqing was not Puhua martial sage's backer, and they laughed sinisterly. He, so it's a nosy brat. Since he's not your lover, then you're dead meat. Just you wait, our alliance will flatten Mount Puhua soon." Puhua martial sage was so angry that he clenched his fists, and his knuckles turned white. Ji Tianqing looked at the black-white double demons with an indifferent expression, and said coldly, "What you should do now is to run away with your tails between your legs and disappear from my sight. How dare you provoke me? Are you tired of living?" His deep and vigorous voice was filled with an indescribable domineering and majestic aura. The black-white double demons were also suppressed to the point that their aura turned sluggish, and they revealed looks of shame and anger. Chapter 2308. The middle-aged man's words finally infuriated Ji Tianqing. He stared coldly at the middle-aged man as his lips curled into a sneer. Very well, you have successfully worn out my patience. As soon as he finished speaking, Ji Tianqing's figure flashed and teleported out. He turned into a silver light and charged toward the middle-aged man. Whoosh! When he arrived in front of the middle-aged man, he had turned into a giant star sword that was hundreds of feet long, bursting with invincible power. They were not far apart, and Ji Tianqing was too fast. When the giant star sword was in front of the middle-aged man, he suddenly came to his senses and hurriedly retreated. But it was all in vain. Boom! In the deafening noise, the middle-aged man's body was smashed into pieces by the giant sword and turned into a rain of flesh and blood, splashing in the sky. Among the pieces of flesh and blood, there was a blazing white divine soul. It was also cracked by the giant sword and floated in the sky in a daze. The middle-aged man's body was destroyed by Ji Tianqing and his divine soul was severely injured. Then, the giant star sword changed its direction and went toward the old woman in the black robe. The old woman in the black robe was terrified and hurriedly teleported to escape. But she had only flown for about 10 miles when the giant star sword caught up with her and hit her hard. With another muffled bang, the old woman in the black robe was also smashed into pieces of flesh and blood, scattering in the sky. The white-haired old man not far away was already scared out of his wits. He turned around and ran away in horror. He unleashed all the potential he had in his entire life, streaking across the sky as fast as he could, rushing into the white clouds. However, Ji Tianqing teleported hundreds of miles away and caught up with the white-haired old man in the blink of an eye. Swoosh! He waved his right hand and a giant golden sword that was 100 meters long appeared. Boom! The white-haired old man followed in the footsteps of his companions. His body was smashed into pieces on the spot, leaving only his divine soul floating in the sky. Only then did Ji Tianqing stop. Looking at the 3 divine souls who were fleeing in panic, he said with an expressionless face, "Today, I will spare your lives and destroy your corporeal bodies as punishment. If you let me see you again, even the gods won't be able to save you." Then, he stepped across the sky and returned to the back of the glazed fire dragon. The thunderous sound waves were still reverberating in the sky, displaying an unparalleled domineering aura. The 3 balls of souls had learned their lesson. They didn't dare to linger for even a moment, nor did they dare to utter a single word. They fled to the end of the canyon in a panic. In the blink of an eye, the 3 divine souls disappeared into the horizon. It was only now that Puhua Martial Saint regained his senses. He stared at Ji Tianqing, dumbfounded, his eyes wide with shock. Just now, she was the closest to Ji Tianqing and witnessed the whole process with her own eyes. She personally felt Ji Tianqing's terrifying sword intent and mana. At this moment, there was only one thought in her mind. Oh my God! Is this young master a peak martial saint or a martial god? She was a 6th-degree martial saint and had seen the power and means of a peak martial saint. But she was very sure that even a 9th-degree martial saint couldn't be as invincible as Ji Tianqing. After a moment, Puhua Martial Saint regained her senses. She knew that she had lost her composure and hurriedly lowered her head to cover her wound. She staggered towards the glazed fire dragon. Qingqing and Yi suppressed their shock and hurriedly went up to her. "Master! Master, are you all right?" The 2 of them supported Puhua Martial Saint on both sides and asked with concern. Puhua Martial Saint shook her head and said with a weak expression, "Don't worry, I can still hold on." Then, she looked at Ji Tianqing and Yunyao on the dragon's back and bowed sincerely. "I'm layman Puhua from Puhua Mountain in the Eastern Sea. Thank you for saving my life. Puhua would never forget such kindness. In the future, if you have any instructions, Puhua Mountain will go through water and tread on fire without hesitation." Qingqing and Yi bowed together with Puhua Martial Saint, their faces full of gratitude. Now, in Qingqing and Yi's eyes, Ji Tianqing was no longer a fierce and dangerous villain. In the blink of an eye, he had turned into an unfathomable, powerful, and otherworldly expert. Moreover, this expert had a noble character and helped the weak. He was a great hero that was revered by all. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said calmly, "Layman Puhua, you're too polite. Don't worry about such trivial matters. It's not good to stay here and you're seriously injured. The most important thing now is to find a secluded place to heal as soon as possible." What he meant was that they had to leave. Puhua Marshal Saint understood but still reminded him, "Young master, you haven't told me your name. If I want to repay you in the future, I don't know how to find you." Ji Tianqing shook his head and said, "There's no need to repay me. My surname is Ji and this is my wife. Her surname is Yun." Puhua Marshal Saint nodded and said, "I will never forget your peerless demeanor. Young Master Ji's breadth of mind is even more admirable." As for the Sunset Alliance, Puhua still had to remind the two of them. The middle-aged man just now was the deputy leader of the Sunset Alliance and the black-white double ghosts were the protectors. The Sunset Alliance is the strongest martial arts organization in the Eastern Sea. It has 6 martial saints and close to 100,000 members and pirates. Although you and your wife are both otherworldly experts, the Sunset Alliance's power is not ordinary. It is also an evil sect that does all sorts of evil. The two of you have to be careful. Ji Tianqing smiled disapprovingly. They're just a bunch of useless people, not worth mentioning. If they really dare to take revenge on me, they'll be digging their own graves. Puhua Marshal Saint laughed self-deprecatingly and nodded, saying, "That's right. I've worried too much. With young Master Ji's strength and methods, destroying the entire Sunset Alliance is only a matter of time." After saying that, she was about to bid farewell to Ji Tianqing and his wife. However, she hesitated and asked again, "If I'm not wrong, you and your wife are also here for the illusory sky secret realm, right?" Ji Tianqing did not hide it from her and nodded. Puhua Marshal Saint smiled and said, "The entrance to the illusory sky secret realm is 800 miles to the north, in a cave at the bottom of a canyon. However, young Master Ji must be careful. There are more than 10 groups of Martial Saint experts gathered here. I'm afraid there will be a great battle. Thank you for the reminder." Ji Tianqing nodded to express his gratitude. Puhua Marshal Saint did not say anything else and bowed to Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. After saying goodbye, he turned and flew away with the two sisters. On the way to the depths of the mountains, Qing kept looking back and glanced at Yun Yao reluctantly. However, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao had no intention of asking her to stay. She could only leave with Puhua Marshal Saint with a heart full of disappointment and regret. After the three of them disappeared into the horizon, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao rode the glazed fire dragon and flew towards the north. Not long after, the glazed fire dragon flew 800 miles. Ji Tianqing released his divine sense into the canyon and indeed found a cave at the bottom of the canyon. However, the strange thing was that not only was there a powerful sealing force in the cave, there were also several layers of sealing formations outside the cave. Chapter 2309. In the sky, thousands of kilometers away from the Grand Canyon. Puhua Marshal Saint was flying high in the sky with Qingqing and Yi. She was preparing to leave the Grand Canyon, which was filled with powerhouses, and find a secluded place to heal her injuries. However, she kept frowning as she hurried along. Qingqing noticed that her master was a little distracted, so she asked, "Master, what are you thinking about?" As a disciple, it was somewhat inappropriate and rude for her to ask her master so directly. However, the three of them were as close as mother and daughter, so Puhua Marshal Saint did not mind. She pursed her lips and said in a low voice, "I've been thinking. That young master's strength far surpasses that of a martial saint, but he's not a martial god. Who else on this continent could be so powerful? Moreover, He claims that his surname is Ji, and his wife's surname is Yun. I've recalled some legends. Qingqing and Yi were very unfamiliar with the Shenwu continent, and they knew nothing about it. The two of them immediately became interested and looked at Puhua Martial Saint expectantly. They asked, "Master, what legends?" Puhua Martial Saint hesitated for a moment before explaining, "In recent years, I've stepped into the Shenwu continent many times, and I've always heard a name called Ji Tianqing. This person is a legend in the martial world and has created many inconceivable miracles. His reputation has spread throughout the continent, and it can be said that everyone knows of him. It's said that he's young, only in his 20s, but he's already a martial saint. He's the #1 god disciple of the Luoshui divine kingdom and the #1 genius of the human race. He's defeated many peak martial saints and slaughtered millions of demons." Puhua Martial Saint told the two sisters all the legends she had heard. The two sisters listened attentively, and their expressions became more and more shocked and excited. In the end, the two of them could no longer remember how many stories Puhua Martial Saint had told them, nor how many miracles Ji Tianqing had created. They only knew that the legendary Ji Tianqing was definitely a monstrous genius that could not be seen in 10,000 years. He was an existence comparable to a god. How could such a monstrous genius exist? After Puhua Martial Saint finished speaking, she turned to look at the two sisters. Seeing that the two sisters were still in shock and daze, she revealed a smile and said, "Are you shocked by his various deeds?" "That's right, the legendary Ji Tianqing was like a god, so monstrous that it made people feel unreal. Because of this, when I faced that young Master Ji, I didn't think of those legends, nor did I ask for his name. Now that he thought about it, that young Master Ji could very well be the legendary Ji Tianqing. Only a heaven-defying monster like him could possess a fairy-like beauty and have a divine dragon as his mount." Qing and Yi finally came back to their senses and nodded repeatedly like chicks pecking rice. "Yes. Master's guess is right. Young Master Ji is definitely Ji Tianqing. Apart from this answer, I really can't think of a second possibility. That young Master Ji's demeanor and bearing are very much in line with your description of Ji Tianqing. Master, I've always felt that young Master Ji's wife, big sister Yun, is very gentle. She's as perfect as a fairy. If we had known earlier, we wouldn't have left. Wouldn't it have been better if we had stayed with them?" Qing, how can you think like that? Big sister Yun didn't ask you to stay. How can you have the nerve to stay by her side? The two sisters were talking all at once. Qing was still regretting that she didn't have the nerve to stay. Puhua Martial Saint looked at the two of them and shook his head with a wry smile, saying, "You two, stop arguing. It's completely meaningless. Young Master Ji is willing to lend a hand and help me resolve this crisis. This is already a great favor. How can you ask for more? Moreover, young Master Ji and young Lady Yun are a fairy-like couple. What do you two look like by their side? A maid? Or a maid?" Qing pouted disapprovingly and muttered in a low voice, "It's fine even if we're treated as their maid. For such powerful and perfect people like them, who knows how many people would want to be their maid?" Yi immediately rolled her eyes and said unhappily, Qing, can't you be a little more mature?" Puhua Martial Saint smiled wryly again and said with a somewhat self-mocking tone, "Do important people like them need maids and maids? Moreover, the two of you are inexperienced and don't understand the ways of the world. You'll only cause trouble by following them. Alright, let's not talk about this. Let's find a place to heal first." Not long after, Puhua Martial Saint found a remote place and began to circulate his energy to heal his injuries. Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao stood on the dragon's back and looked down at the cave at the bottom of the canyon. The cave wasn't big and was only 100 feet in radius. The surroundings were full of cracks and it was obvious that it had collapsed naturally. 5-colored divine light surged in the cave, emitting a majestic and mighty aura. Outside the cave were piles of rocks. The ground and mountain walls were inlaid with magic treasures and spirit stones to maintain the operation of the formation. A layer of gold and a layer of red light shield protected the cave tightly. Other than that, Ji Tianqing also detected that there were 3 layers of ceiling formations at the cave entrance that hadn't been activated yet. There were a total of 5 layers of seals and all of them were saint-level formations. Strange, who would set up 5 layers of defensive formations here and seal the cave? Ji Tianqing couldn't help but frown after observing for a while. Yunyao said without hesitation, it should be those martial saints who arrived first. They were afraid that others would enter the secret realm, so they did it on purpose. Ji Tianqing revealed a contemptuous sneer and said, "What's the use of setting up a seal outside the cave? If we can't break the god-level seal inside the cave, everything will be in vain." Yunyao nodded and said, "This is human nature. We don't want others to get what we can't get." Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and said with a playful smile, "There are only 3 groups of people here. Let's take advantage of the fact that most of the martial saints haven't found this place yet." Yunyao glanced at the 3 groups of people outside the cave and nodded, saying, "That's good too." After saying that, she put away the glazed fire dragon and followed Ji Tianqing to land among the rocks outside the cave. 2 middle-aged men stood at the entrance of the cave and stared at the defensive light shield with full concentration. They were using their divine senses to examine it carefully. Suddenly, they heard footsteps behind them. The 2 of them immediately turned around and looked sharply at Ji Tianqing and Yunyao. Seeing the 2 of them walking over, the middle-aged man in golden armor asked angrily, "What do you want?" Ji Tianqing's lips curled into a cold smile and said, "What else can people who have come here do?" The other burly man in purple robes said with a hideous smile, "Boy, you don't know the rules. Do you know what first come, first served means? You just arrived and you want to cut the queue. Don't you see that the other 2 groups of people are still waiting?" As he spoke, he pointed at the piles of rocks on both sides. There were 2 groups of people standing on top of the 2 piles of rocks. There were a total of 6 cultivators. 2 martial saints and 4 martial monarchs. They were all looking at Ji Tianqing with angry faces. Ji Tianqing immediately laughed and shouted domineeringly, "What rules? I am the rules." Chapter 23:10. The 2 middle-aged men obviously did not expect Ji Tianqing to be so arrogant. After being stunned for a moment, the 2 of them came back to their senses. Immediately, they revealed hideous smiles and a strong killing intent burst out from their bodies. "Kid, you're too arrogant. Humph, there are really some hotheads who are not afraid of death." As they spoke, the 2 of them took out their swords and magic weapons at the same time and rushed toward Ji Tianqing and Yunyao with murderous intent. "How dare you snatch my territory? You're courting death. Kid who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth, I'll let you know now that there's always someone better than you." As they shouted angrily, the 2 of them waved their swords and slashed out an overwhelming amount of sword and saber radiance that shrouded Ji Tianqing and Yunyao's figures. Ji Tianqing did not even use the sword of burial of heaven. He directly raised his palms and slapped out 2 dazzling golden lights toward the 2 of them. The golden lights formed into 2 giant palms and burst out a violent power that instantly destroyed the sword and saber radiance. Bang! Bang! In the muffled sound, the 2 middle-aged men were hit at the same time. They spat out mouthfuls of blood and flew backward, smashing hard on the golden light shield at the entrance of the cave. Thousands of pieces of golden light were wrapped by the violent force and splashed in all directions. The piles of rocks on the ground outside the cave were also shaken into powder and scattered in the air. The 2 groups of warriors near the entrance of the cave quickly released their magic power to form a shield to block the violent shock wave. After the dust and sand dispersed, the area within a radius of 10 miles outside the cave became flat and clean. The two martial sages in purple robes and golden armor staggered up from the ground with their faces full of blood. The two of them were angry and shocked. They stared fiercely at Ji Tianqing. Seeing Ji Tianqing approaching step by step, the two of them subconsciously stepped back. However, the golden light shield was behind them and there was no way to retreat. "Kid, you. Don't be so arrogant." The purple-robed man held his treasured saber and pointed it at Ji Tianqing. He put on a brave front and shouted, "First come, first served. Only those who can break the sealing formation can be considered capable. If you break the rules like this, you will become the enemy of all martial sages. You will definitely not have a good ending." The middle-aged man in golden armor also said indignantly, "Kid, even if you're strong, you'll definitely bring trouble to yourself if you provoke everyone's anger. If you leave now, we can pretend that nothing has happened. If you insist on making things difficult for us, then don't blame us for fighting you to the death." Although the two of them sounded tough on the surface, they were actually terrified in their hearts. Ji Tianqing did not take their threats to heart at all. With a contemptuous sneer, he said, "The fish will die, but the net will not break." As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his hands again. Dazzling starlight accumulated in his palms. Seeing that he was about to attack again, the two men's faces suddenly changed. They flew to the left side with fear, and fled in a panic. Of course, it was too shameful to flee with their tails between their legs. The two of them did not forget to say a few words. "Kid, if you insist on doing things your own way, you'll definitely cause big trouble. You're finished. You'll become the target of everyone. Let's wait and see." As soon as they finished speaking, the two of them had already fled 10 miles away. Ji Tianqing waved his hands and shot out two huge starlight swords toward the two men across the air. Bang bang! The starlight swords pierced the two of them fiercely, and two loud, dull sounds were heard. The middle-aged man in golden armor was pierced by the huge starlight swords, and his armor shattered. He fell into the canyon with blood spurting out from his body. The purple-robed man was also hit by the sword light. Blood spurted out from his body, and he let out a shrill scream. The two of them were terrified. They ignored their injuries and hurriedly got up to speed to escape. Ji Tianqing did not chase after them. He watched the two figures disappear into the depths of the canyon. Then, he turned his head to look at the warriors on both sides. When his gaze swept over them, the warriors on both sides were on high alert. They instinctively drew their swords and sabers. Ji Tianqing said expressionlessly, "I don't want to repeat what I said just now. Get lost." The two groups of warriors were instantly enraged by the humiliation. Their faces were filled with grief and indignation. After hesitating for a while, the two martial sages in the lead suppressed their anger and retreated with their subordinates. After retreating for 20 miles, the two groups of people stopped and hid in the woods and among the rocks. They looked at Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao from afar. Of course, they were not willing to leave just like that. They were just hiding not far away and waiting for an opportunity. Once Ji Tianqing broke the formation and something unexpected happened, they would definitely take the opportunity to attack and hit him when he was down. When Ji Tianqing saw that the two groups of people were showing weakness, he ignored them and walked to the entrance of the cave. He used the secret technique of the divine eye, causing his eyes to turn dark gold. He stared at the golden light shield at the entrance of the cave without blinking. The scene he saw immediately changed. The dazzling golden light shield turned into a huge fishing net. It was made up of thousands of golden threads. Those were the veins and structure of the sealing formation. Ji Tianqing focused on observing the formation. His brain was also working quickly to analyze the formation structure and deduce a way to break it. Yun Yao stood beside him. Her divine sense covered the surrounding 300 miles. She was secretly on guard. Once someone approached and tried to harm Ji Tianqing, they would definitely be stopped by her. Soon, 15 minutes passed. Ji Tianqing finally saw through the ceiling formation and deduced a way to break it. He raised his palms and started to cast spells. He shot out rays of 5-colored brilliance and injected them into the golden light shield. Under his control, the 5-colored brilliance entered the golden light shield and quietly changed the veins of the formation. In just a few short minutes, the first ceiling array formation was broken by him. The dark gold defensive light shield melted quickly like snow under the sun. Ji Tianqing didn't stop there. His eyes glowed with golden light as he stared at the second ceiling formation. He stared at the dark red light shield with full concentration. He observed and analyzed the formation structure and deduced a way to break it. As time passed, the canyon became darker and darker. At the same time, a few more martial saints arrived at the canyon and landed near the entrance of the cave. There were a total of 6 martial saints. They were divided into 3 groups and stood dozens of miles away from the entrance of the cave. They secretly observed for a while before flying toward the entrance of the cave. However, they were quickly stopped by 2 groups of martial artists. The 2 groups of martial artists were very angry. They told the 6 martial saints that the entrance of the secret territory had been occupied by Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. No one could even think of approaching them. Otherwise, they would infuriate Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao and bring about a fatal disaster. These 2 groups of martial artists had been humiliated by Ji Tianqing before. They were angry but did not dare to say anything. Therefore, they deliberately exaggerated and fanned the flames to provoke the 6 martial saints. The 6 martial saints were indeed enraged. They were full of anger and were full of hostility toward Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. Isn't that kid too arrogant? Does he want to be everyone's enemy? The illusory sky secret territory is martial god Nangong's cave. The fated ones can get it. Every martial artist in the world has a chance. What right does he have to occupy the entrance? We are all martial saints who have been famous for many years. What kind of world have we not seen? How can we be intimidated by a kid and not move forward? Chapter 23:11. After 15 minutes, Ji Tianqing finally saw through the second array. He was about to use a secret technique to break through the dark red defensive light shield. At this moment, more than 10 martial artists flew over from both sides and landed on the empty ground outside the cave. 8 martial sages and 4 martial lords surrounded the cave entrance in a half-moon shape, surrounding Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. Seeing that they had come with ill intentions, Yun Yao's face turned cold, and her eyes shone with a cold light. She took 2 steps forward with an indifferent expression, shielding Ji Tianqing behind her, and looked at the crowd with a sharp gaze. Swoosh! A silver light flashed in her hands, and 2 silver-white swords appeared, exuding an extremely sharp sword aura. Yun Yao waved her right hand, and a blazing white sword radiance appeared, drawing a half-moon-shaped gully on the ground in front of the crowd. Whoever dares to cross this line will be killed without mercy. Yun Yao pointed at the crowd with her sword and shouted coldly with an expressionless face. Such an arrogant and domineering attitude immediately angered the crowd. In particular, the older martial sages were even more furious. They were so angry that they started laughing. "Ha, little girl, you're too arrogant. You want to make everyone your enemy. You're overestimating yourselves. It's understandable that you're young and frivolous, but people as arrogant and ignorant as you are really pitiful. You want to intimidate us by drawing a line. Do you think we're 3-year-old children?" These martial sages came later. They had different appearances, but they were all dressed luxuriously and had an extraordinary aura. After all, they were all tyrants who dominated a region. They were martial arts leaders who had been in high positions for a long time, or the rulers of an empire. Yun Yao was too lazy to argue with them. She held 2 swords and looked at the crowd coldly, ready to launch a thunderous attack at any time. At this moment, an old man with white hair and a beard walked out of the crowd. He stroked his beard with his left hand and held a purple jade rui in his right hand. He stepped over the line on the ground and walked toward Yun Yao with an arrogant expression. "I'm going to cross this line. Let's see what a little girl like you can do to me." The white-haired old man sneered. His expression was filled with contempt and mockery. Yun Yao immediately frowned. She swung her sword as fast as lightning, sending out starry sword lights that filled the sky. "Take responsibility for your own life and death." Following her cold shout, the more than 90 starry sword lights formed a sword formation with a radius of 3,000 meters and pressed down on the white-haired old man. Swish! Swish! In an instant, sword chi burst out within the gorge with dazzling brilliance, causing one to be unable to open their eyes or breathe. The white-haired old man didn't hesitate either. His left palm struck out with surging golden flames, while his right hand waved the purple jade scepter, sending out dozens of dark purple lightning arcs. The moment he struck, he displayed the strength of a 6th-degree martial saint and used the power of thunder. Pang pang pang. With a series of muffled sounds, the golden flames and lightning arcs that filled the sky were immediately crushed into pieces by the sword light. More than half of the sword light was shattered, but there were still more than 30 of them left. They enveloped the white-haired elder, leaving him nowhere to hide. Bang 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 bang. Another series of muffled sounds was heard. The white-haired old man was hit by more than 10 swords. Instantly, blood spurted out and he let out a painful scream. The violent impact immediately exploded, sending the sand and stones all over the ground flying. The white-haired old man was sent flying 10 miles away and fell miserably into the gorge. By the time he got up from the ground, his face was already covered with blood and there were more than 10 wounds on his body. Blood kept gushing out, dyeing his white robe red. His entire body was covered with mud and he looked rather miserable. He no longer had the demeanor of a reclusive expert. The other 11 martial saints and martial monarchs were also shaken by the impact, their faces pale. Everyone retreated and tried their best to resist the impact. Only then did they dissipate the power of the impact. Yun Yao didn't chase after them. She stood at the same spot and looked coldly at the crowd. She shouted in a deep voice, "This is only a warning. If anyone wants to die, I'll fulfill his wish." The crisp and cold voice reverberated in the gorge, shaking the hearts of the dozens of practitioners. The 4 martial monarchs quietly retreated, their eyes filled with deep fear. However, the martial saints were even more furious and ashamed. They all exploded with a strong fighting spirit. "Damn you, bitch! You've gone too far. I'll kill you." The white-haired old man flew back as fast as lightning. His face was as gloomy as ice. He crazily charged at Yun Yao. He made a mysterious seal with his left hand and condensed a giant axe the size of a mountain with a dark golden light. It fell from the sky and chopped at Yun Yao. He waved the purple jade rui with his right hand and shot out 9 Zhijian dragons toward Yun Yao. The other 7 martial saints were also filled with righteous indignation. They roared in unison and brandished their swords and sabers toward Yun Yao. "They're too arrogant. Everyone, let's join forces and kill them. This adulterous couple is the scum and disgrace of the martial world. Let's join forces and get rid of them for Tianqing. No matter how strong they are, they can't stop us. Everyone, let's attack together." Suddenly, everyone waved their swords and sabers, which covered the sky and the sun. They poured toward Yun Yao like a torrential flood. No matter how strong Yun Yao was, it was impossible for her to block the joint attack of 8 martial saints. She would definitely be careless and might even be injured. However, Ji Tianqing stopped casting and suddenly turned around. A fierce murderous intent flashed in his eyes. He held the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand. An unparalleled domineering aura burst out from his body. He attacked with all his might. Swoosh! Swoosh! He shot out a golden dragon claw as big as a mountain from his left palm. It smashed the giant axe that fell from the sky and sent 2 martial saints flying. He waved the sword of burial of heaven in his right hand and shot out 49 starry sword radiances, which destroyed the martial arts light that filled the sky. More than 20 sword radiances were shattered. The other 20 starry swords hit 4 martial saints hard and sent them flying. Yunyao also used her unique swordsmanship. The 2 martial saints were covered with wounds. Blood spurted out from their bodies. They screamed and flew away. In the blink of an eye, the 8 martial saints were sent flying more than 10 miles away. They fell into the valley and smashed into the rocks and ruins. Everyone was seriously injured. There were hideous wounds on their chests and backs. Dark red blood kept gushing out and staining their clothes. However, Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao stood at the entrance of the cave unscathed. Their bodies were full of chilling murderous intent. The husband and wife joined forces and defeated the 8 martial saints easily. Such terrifying strength made the 8 martial saints and 4 martial monarchs show deep fear. They were angry and humiliated. Everyone got up from the ground and glared at Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. Damn bastards! You are so domineering. Sooner or later, you will be besieged and hacked to death by everyone. Young people, the Jianghu is very big and the waves are even bigger. You are so unscrupulous. Soon, you will be overturned. I am waiting to see your end. Hee hee. There are at least a dozen martial saints rushing here. Let's see how long you can last. I keep feeling that these 2 people are familiar, especially that white-robed guy. He's so young, but he's so strong. He's definitely not a nobody. Some people cursed angrily. Some people were waiting to watch a good show. Some people were guessing the identities of Ji Tianqing and Yun Yao. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.